How are you doing?
Good. How are you? Oh, this is hot.
Megan should be calling in.
Awesome. Hello, can you hear us? Megan?
Hello. You
Okay.
hear me?
You can hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. We can hear you, so that's good.
Great. And you hear Ron? Hey, Ron, will you test your mic?
Testing.
Hello?
Perfect.
Okay, sweet.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's board workshop. We'll go ahead and first, I'd like to say, as we start this morning, congratulations to Mr. Edwards and also to Liz Barker for their election victories yesterday. Congratulations, Mr. Edwards. We'll be working together for another 2 years or hopefully more. So as we start this morning, we have a pretty packed agenda, so we'll go ahead. Superintendent Connor, if you can go ahead and start with the first presentation.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. Excited about a lot of the topics to share with you today during workshop. It is a rapid fire agenda because it's pretty dense, so we're going to move quickly. But obviously, we do want to take time and answer your questions as thoroughly as possible, and then we can do any follow-ups as well. But we're going to move quickly, and we're going to launch this thing with Mr. Parento, our Supervisor of Government Affairs, who's going to talk about a legislative platform. I was able to work with each of you individually to get some ideas around what we would want to advocate with the legislature in the upcoming session. And so we've got some proposals here that we want to discuss. We also have Megan Fay, who is here from Capital City, who is joining us virtually. And then along with the legislative platform, there are several policies that we want to bring forth for revision and updates. So, Mr. Parento, please begin.
Thank you. Good morning, Superintendent and members of the board. I also want to point out that Mr. Ron LaFace is also joining us virtually for this conversation. And we do want to go through and highlight some of these items that are a part of our proposed legislative platform for the 2025 legislative session and outline some of the different pieces within those that we think are going to be good for us to advocate for at the legislative level. Like the superintendent said, we've been discussing this for a couple of months now, since really the end of the last legislative session, and working with our partners at Capital City Consulting to try to put together a platform of items that are achievable within the legislative session. So we'll begin with an outline of each of the potential priorities. The first one would be enhancements to the voluntary pre-kindergarten program. The second, continued statewide deregulation, which began in the last legislative session. Continued education funding increases. A modernization of funding for construction costs for school districts, school safety and mental health, and ensuring efficiency and accuracy in scholarship funding and reporting. So a little bit of a breakdown within each of those. With enhancements to the VPK program, optimizing early learning in innovative ways to provide enhanced VPK programming. There are opportunities within this to either increase provider reimbursement rates like was done at the legislative level last year, or extending the VPK school year from 540 hours to 720 hours. And recently, the big push has been for that full day VPK. And we know that at the legislative level, that has kind of been a non-starter. So we're taking a different approach, trying to take small bites of the apple to eventually attain that goal. And this is one way we feel that we can be in a position to potentially have some success with this in the enhancements to the VPK program. Continued deregulation, enhancing operational efficiency while maintaining assessment accountability. This could include supporting local district control and oversight of potential increased efficiency and cost savings by repealing or making optional the middle and high school start time mandate that was put into place back in the 2023 legislative session. This could also include allowing districts to post all of the required public notices on district websites. Currently, we're limited to meeting notices and budget notices that we can post on our website. We have to post the rest of ours through the Sarasota County website. Extending the suspension of the cost per student station limitation to achieve cost savings, and developing alternative certification pathways specific to ESE instructional personnel to help try to recruit and retain for those essential positions. Continued education funding increases, ensuring competitive compensation for all personnel, with continued increases in the FEFP to support salary enhancements for teachers and staff, including an increase of no less than 5% to the base student allocation to help tackle rising costs for districts, and also offering financial incentives such as stipends, loan forgiveness, and salary adjustments to help attract and retain, again, qualified ESE educators. Modernizing funding for construction costs. This is one that Dr. Kemp and I have been discussing for quite a few months now about some of the additional costs that we see here in Sarasota County that you may not see in more inland districts. So addressing geographical and building code discrepancies by modernizing that funding formula within the FEFP to account for varying construction costs across counties, especially in coastal areas like ours that have additional building restrictions like having to, construct those buildings to higher wind loads. This is currently done through other areas of the FEFP where they have additional cost factors to help equalize some of that funding, but it's not done for construction cost discrepancies. Coastal counties do have, again, those increased additional wind load requirements that add quite a bit on our construction costs. And, as an example, we're building a K-8 for $425 a square foot, and there's an inland Florida district that's building one of almost the same size for $274 a square foot, just by not having those additional restrictions. School safety and mental health, providing additional funding for the safe schools and mental health assistance allocations in the FEFP to support the enhancements required to meet heightened safety standards, ensure a secure learning environment for all of our students, and again, helping recruit and retain those essential school counselor, school social worker, school psychologist, and school nurse positions to support the needs of our students. Last year, the state did increase the safe schools allocation by $40 million and the mental health allocation by $20 million. However, that didn't fully fund the costs associated with some of the increased school safety measures that came out of the legislative session. And ensuring efficiency and accuracy in scholarship funding. Spoke a lot with our CFO about this one to ensure that efficient and accurate scholarship funding reporting is done through additional controls and systems by establishing a separate quote-unquote district for scholarship organizations within the FEFP, similar to what's been done for Florida Virtual and for lab schools. And also transitioning the Florida Department of Education to a modern student information system to create a transparent tracking system and prevent funding discrepancies that will allow the equitable distribution of funds so that the FEFP funding does follow that student. And with that, we are happy to take questions.
Ms. Marinelli?
On that last one where the FEFP funding follows the student, so let's say that at the beginning of the school year, that child leaves and that money goes, but they come back. and that money never comes back. So is this what you're addressing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's been an issue that has been happening across the state for districts.
Oh.
And I know in speaking with Ms. Penner that there's a lot of money that when students come back, we're not receiving or not receiving in a timely manner.
Okay, so I think with that when you're talking about it, to make sure the public understands that we're not getting that money back, it just goes, but we want to make sure that that money comes back, and doesn't stay.
And we do have a drafted sheet of talking points
Yeah.
that are much larger than what could fit on one PowerPoint
Exactly.
slide, but that is included in that to make sure that we're advocating for that message in a clear way about what we're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
If you don't mind, Ms. Penner, if you, for the sake of the public and for the community to understand a little bit about the challenges with the scholarship funding and how that gets reconciled or the delay in that in terms of the funding, do you mind sharing just a little bit of that and why we would want to advocate for something like this?
Sure. When the scholarship program was first brought into the FEFP, of course, most of you are familiar with the McKay scholarships, which was when it was first brought in, and it was really manageable. We would enter in the FTE for those students. We would receive the calculation of those funds for the students, and then the dollars would get deducted before they ever got deposited into our account. And it worked really well, and we knew that it was not perfect, but it worked well, and again, it was manageable because it was a smaller number of students. So when this bloomed and became a much bigger issue, and was managed through a different organization as well, we found that there were timing differences. So the scholarships are paid quarterly, whereas, as you know, having been in the district before, we assess and determine FTE twice a year, so it doesn't match. Ooh, it just got very loud. It does not match the timing of that. And we weren't having good communication in those instances, yes, where a student may apply for a scholarship over the summer and then register for a private school. The private school may not have capacity. So that student does come and from day one may be on our campus, so we report the FTE. However, they're still being deducted from our FEFP. And worked really hard, the Department of Education with their support, to try to better understand that and match that and come up with a solution. And it is getting better, but we find that some of those students, again, that were on our campuses day one, that had already had the money drawn for that scholarship, it may take 18 months for us to get made whole, not to mention there's not really a great way for us to reconcile. We used to get really good lists of those students that were that had gotten a scholarship because we were entering in those FTE. Now Department of Education enters those in, so we don't even get the lists any longer, or at least not the lists that we can feel comfortable with, again, matching the numbers that we've got. So again, what we're hoping is that they pull them out of each county's reporting structure, then they will manage on their own. We've already got really great systems set up to where, that same type of sharing opportunity, for instance, if a student starts with us and then goes to Manatee, we've got a good way to figure out where that student needs to be and who should really keep that funding for the student. We don't have the same type of situation with the scholarship students. So that's why I think if we put them as a separate district, it will help incorporate some of those controls that we need so that there is accountability.
Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you. Mr. Connor?
All right. Are we good with Megan and Ron?
Yeah, Megan and Ron, thank you for taking time out of
for
your
all the
morning
input you
to
gave
be
us
here,
there.
but also thank you for the assistance in helping us draft this legislative platform and for the work that we'll be doing over the next few months as we get ready for the upcoming legislative session.
Chris, I have one quick question. Are we getting an update on this? Because I think the version I have is a little older.
Yes, we do have a new version that has been revised. I can provide you with that as well. We're also going to create handouts of these as well as postcards similar to what we have for the referendum with this.
All right. Policy?
Yes, with that, we can move on to policy revisions. We only have a few this time, I think only 6. The first one is our policy 7.71, selection policy for professional construction-related services. This removed the project threshold cap numbers that were within the policy to add the reference to the threshold amounts that are provided in Florida statutes, because those change from time to time, so we wanted to make sure that we didn't have to keep revising the policy every time those changed. It also updated the advertisement process in accordance with our current practice of publishing those advertisements on the Sarasota County website. Second policy is 7.102, and there was a modification that was made to this one from what was provided to you. There was a requested change in the percentage of lease payments as a percentage of capital outlay millage dollars for a measure of long-term debt. This percentage will be reflected in the upcoming budget book, but in the original version, the percentage itself was changed. The state allows for up to 75% to be from the, let me make sure I get this right. The state allows for up to 75%. The board has taken a conservative approach of 50%. And so with 50%, when the state allowed for 2 mills for capital outlay, that 50% was 1 mill. So the change, the 50% stays, but that 1 mill now decreases to 0.75 mills because we're now allowed 1.5 mills of our levy. So I do have a new version of that policy for each of you so that you can see it. And that will be reflected in the upcoming request to advertise these policies with the correct version. The third policy is policy 7.771, capital assets. This policy was updated to align the policy with changes from the Government Accounting Standards Board to GASB 87 and GASB 96. This is the practice that we're already doing on the accounting standards, so we wanted to make sure that our policy was reflective of that. Policy 9.75, community service. This aligns with the state statute that paid work hours can now be used as community service hours to meet the requirements for Florida scholarship programs. Policy 3.90, charter schools. There was a lot of changes made to this policy. It hadn't been touched since 2018, and Millie Wheeler and I got together and had to make sure that we got this updated to align with the current state statutes. We removed certain outdated information on what applications and contracts should contain and referenced the standard application forms and contracts that are prepared by the Florida Department of Education. We updated the information on renewal, non-renewal, and termination of a charter school and alignment with state statutes on accountability and student achievement for those charter schools. We also updated the requirements for a representative of the governing board of a charter school that's earned a D or an F grade to appear before the sponsor and submit a school improvement plan. We incorporated the requirement that the district provide required funding to charter schools if a millage levy is approved by the voters through the referendum. And we updated the reporting requirements for charter schools to the sponsor. The final policy is a new policy for the district. Policy 4.24, artificial intelligence. We wanted to create this policy to provide guidance on acceptable use of AI tools for students, for teachers, and for staff. We know there's been a lot of conversation about AI and the emergence of it and the changing dynamics of it. So we wanted to put certain things into place as guardrails for this. So prohibiting allowing AI to learn passwords or district data or personally identifiable employee or student information or recording of things by AI without approval. This includes information for students that's contained within the academic honesty policy about AI use for coursework and certain requirements that you would have to do for that. And it also provides requirements that any AI platform selected for district use aligns with HB 1361 from the previous legislative session, that if the AI technology meets certain requirements, the district would be eligible to receive grant funding from the state to support AI use implementation for students and teachers.
An example of that would be something we've already approved, and that was PackBack. That uses AI technology. It streamlines the process for teachers for grading written feedback. It also has specific algorithms to assist students, kind of tutor them in improving their writing score. So that could potentially meet the criteria to be eligible for a grant fund.
And those requirements from the state are that they have they're a certain platform, that they provide professional learning to teachers, that they provide one-on-one tutoring aligned to the best standards in reading and math for students, that they provide standard-aligned lesson plans and provide insights on student progress, and that they provide district and school-level reporting and parental access to those AI uses.
Ms. Ziegler?
Thank you. No, I appreciate this. 'Cause this is like what's the right word?
Chartered.
Thank you. We were trying to say that during the last part, and we got uncharted territory. I'm curious, as I know that we already approved. This makes my heart burn because I can't stand it, but I also understand that this is the brave new world that we're in, and so I appreciate giving those guardrails. My question is, and this may not be answered per se right now, but because it is an uncharted territory, do we have? And I don't want to be like, oh, let's add a committee, but do we have a mechanism for staff to really provide feedback, and how are they utilizing it? Because I certainly believe no one wants our students to, because I've used AI and it's extraordinary. It's amazing that you don't have to really think about anything and it just outputs whatever, and that's very counterproductive to our mission here. But what is the role? How are we supporting staff? In addition to not only identify when it's being utilized, because I'm sure that's going to occur, as much as I want to assume everyone's honest, I just believe people find shortcuts and they're going to optimize them. So what does that look like? And is there something kind of more from the management side that you're thinking?
In terms of feedback loops to see how this is impacting in the classroom?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a couple of general ways that we can do that. That's one of them being the Superintendent's Teacher Advisory Council, which is made up of 24 of our personnel across all grade spans that can provide that input and feedback about what they're experiencing. I think formally too, technology doing periodic surveys to see how that impact is happening, focus groups, obviously. So we just have to deploy a lot of those mechanisms, structured ways to pull that feedback to truly get insight as to how that's impacting the classroom. So we will be certain to do that because this is uncharted territory, and this is more, I would call more of a boilerplate policy that will need to evolve over time and continuously as this technology advances more and more.
No, I appreciate it being proactive on it. I just don't know how. And how are there in that one? I know that was more for helping our staff grade. But is it also able to identify when AI is being utilized?
Yes, it does have a plagiarism and an AI detection component to it.
Okay, well, to be continued. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Edwards.
So if we're staying in the AI, because I want to go back to charter school, I just kept all my questions to the end. But in terms of AI, I know my first suggestion is, I looked at this. My word was frontier. It's a whole new world, and I would suggest that the board be updated on a quarterly basis of any, not that we have to change the policy on a quarterly basis, but there should be some conversation that's brought to the board on a quarterly basis, because this is a rapidly changing frontier. And I like the fact that we have a boilerplate that we're jumping off from, but I just think things are coming at us so quickly. And I look at also best practices of what's happening in the country at other school districts, that we should have people bringing those ideas and suggestions to us quarterly, that we can quickly discuss and decide if it needs to become policy or not. So that's somehow that we are having some quarterly AI conversation. I spoke to Mr. Parento about this just earlier this week, and there was, I guess, a list of things that were put into this policy, and based upon the committee, there was a committee that was put together that put this policy together. I asked who was on it, and I appreciate what's here. I was just curious what didn't make it, as to why, because then that might be a heads up of something that we should be paying attention to as a board. And then lastly, I think another source of really credible information that should be coming to us about what's happening in the classroom is a really tight monitor of our ACE and IB policies, because they have to be doing a deep dive on best practices of how AI is utilized in those programs, and that would give us a heads up into how we want to have it across the district. So again, I don't have any real questions. These are just suggestions that I'm throwing out because it's going to be a bigger issue all the time. And if I may switch...
If I may respond, just for a little bit of background on how we got to this point on this policy. Back in, I would say, February, the superintendent, Mr. Binswanger, Mr. Maniglia, myself, and Mr. Renoff got together and we talked through some of our ideas on this policy and what we would want to include after we had already got the academic honesty policy into place. We looked through policies from other districts across Florida. We looked at some districts across the country. We looked at colleges and what they were doing, and we looked for all of the resources that we could find on best practices and those that were kind of thought leaders on it and training others on it across the country. I know Mr. Maniglia spent a few days at a conference that was almost solely dedicated to AI and brought back a lot of good ideas with that. We got Ms. O'Day and Dr. Cantalupo involved in the conversations. I met with Deb Jackalone. I met with Dr. Green. We got some feedback from them on what they were hearing from principals and made sure that we took all of that into consideration as we drafted this policy. And to answer your question on some of the items that were discussed that some people had suggested, one was prohibiting AI use outright. We know it's already being used, so it might be a little bit too late for that, or putting in right off the bat that there would be specific required AI instruction, but right now that really hasn't been developed. So that's something that we're going to keep an eye out for. I know that Mr. Binswanger is on top of AI and what's going on, and from his lens to make sure that if anything changes, he sends me AI articles all the time about it to make sure that we're in the loop and on top of it.
Great. If I may turn the channel to the charter school policy. I have it here somewhere. Oh, there it is. When I looked at, it's quite an extensive document just on that policy. And if you really just eyeball it, there's so much that's just redlined. And I read it. And basically what I walked away with, which I think, at least from my seat, connects me back to our legislative agenda. I don't know that this is the exact time to start talking about it, but I do want to begin to come up with, like we know that the tracking of the vouchers is a problem. That's an easy one because it's dollars and cents. But for example, there's two abilities for a charter school to get approved in Sarasota or in any county. They can apply directly to the state board, or they could come to us. It would seem to me that the state has an incentive to approve everybody. And so, because that's their policy and they're, all school choice all day, all the time. So what I'm a little concerned about that is we could get oversaturated in Sarasota, and it's not necessarily in anyone's best interest to have oversaturation of any market in a county, let alone in public education. So that is a concern of mine. Not only that, if they get approved at the state, which we had no control over, guess who's responsible for monitoring them and making sure that they're complying? And if we get oversaturation or they keep sending, then we have to hire more staff, which comes out of the FEFP. So things are not adding up here in terms of how and what I've been saying all along about charter schools is, let me be clear and make no mistake. I am a fan of choice. I like it. We have wonderful charter schools that I happily renewed, but it's not a one-size-fits-all the way the charters work, and we have to begin speaking truth to power about where some of this isn't working specifically for Sarasota. It's not a one-size-fits-all. So, and then the other part of this is when all of these charter schools can theoretically be approved at Tallahassee, we share referendum dollars, and I'm not sure that the public is aware that when we're asking for money, we're not just asking for money for us, we're asking for money for all the charter schools that may have not been approved by us. So I just, at some point, think that we need to have a workshop. We need to start talking about the fact that we do like choice and we're standing behind it and we're not changing any of that. But here are the tweaks that we see that are legislatively offensive and don't work for our bottom line. So I'm not suggesting that it's in this legislative agenda, but I am suggesting it go on a workshop and we start keeping a list of those unfunded mandates or those types of expenses that don't work for us because of choice.
Thank you. And I would also agree with that in reference to this. I know that there'll be a lot more oversight. I spoke to Mr. Connor about this just yesterday in reference to the charter schools, and as they have continued to take away our decision-making in reference to the approval process, which ultimately they will. But at the end of the day, it just needs to be that we need to make sure that it's the best for Sarasota County, especially when the dollars come into play, because obviously the students are first. But I do like the policy that they now have to come back in front of us to show us why they're getting a D or an F and be able to show how they're going to do it so that our staff is able to assist them to get them to where they need to be. Ms. Marinelli?
Yeah, I agree with many of the points that Mr. Edwards said and you, and having had worked with the charter schools for a long time, what happens is you had districts that pushed them all away, and of course they ran to the legislature. Sarasota was never known for that. Sarasota was always known to have high-quality charter schools. So because of this one-size-fits-all, the districts, especially ours, we get penalized. I've said this before. Either we are going to be responsible, so let us be responsible for all of it, or let the legislature be responsible, have a whole thing, because it's getting too complicated, and I don't think the public realizes so much of it is legislative. We don't have a lot of control over things. So I don't know when you want to address it. I know we've all had one-on-ones about this, but it is a one-size-fits-all, and it's not and life isn't fair, I know, but when it comes to dollars and students, there needs to be some more fairness of how things are decided. If you got a district that's not doing things, deal with that. Don't make a policy that affects us all. So,
Ms. Ziegler?
Well, it's so similar to the district being created at the state level for with the request on the legislative platform. And again, I would agree this is probably warrants a further discussion on a separate workshop. But for a lot of the same reasons when we're talking about the oversight, the interest, I mean, I believe there's and I think we all share this, so I'm not trying to say this in a negative manner, that we look at them as all of our students because they're in our community. However, if we're talking about the financial impact, there's a little bit of difference, and that's kind of where it gets a little nuanced. And the more, I haven't seen us blow up as if we look at Broward or some other counties where they have just extraordinary numbers when it comes to charter schools, we're nowhere near that. I say we've had a handful, maybe two, I think, in the last couple of years, whereas in 2014, we had 11 applications, none of which actually went through. But they all decided to not continue. It wasn't our board, by the way, just for the record. But but when I think about all the nuances, if perhaps it's a conversation, if it is becoming time consuming, because even the money following the child is still, it's no different from the scholarship than we're talking about charter schools. It's all the same thing. Perhaps the mechanism of tracking the student from a financial standpoint is more streamlined when it comes to charter schools versus the new scholarship programs, but the issues still impact. And so if one solution's for the state to have a, quote unquote, scholarship district, perhaps it's a conversation of what would that look like for a charter district for the state to manage. I'm putting all of this on the table because I don't think the difference, I think the similarities are apply across the board. So I think it does warrant a workshop discussion.
And I would agree 100%. Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that the issues, and perhaps Mrs. Ziegler and I clearly don't see it exactly the same way, and that's why a workshop, I think, really does warrant the conversation, so that when we get ready for the next legislative agenda, that we have a consensus on what can be asked for correctly by the board.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, thank you. Mr. Connor?
Thank you, Mr. Parento. We're going to move on to our next topic, which is Ms. Lynn Peterson and Aaron Singerman with our medical and wellness update. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning, board members. Superintendent Connor, nice to see you. I know we're behind, so we'll do our best. We've shortened our presentation. We're going to get through it quickly, and hopefully have some time for some questions. Yeah. So today, Aaron Singerman is here to present for wellness. I've also brought our extended team of consultants. Our pharmacy consultant is Ellen Butcher from Marsh, and then after we go through the pharmacy, I will bring up our benefit and medical consultant, Jeff Jinks from Aon. So I'll let Aaron start off with our presentation.
All right. Good morning. Thanks, Lynn. I hope everyone's doing well. As Lynn mentioned, very high level today. I did provide a handout in advance that goes into some of the individual programs and outcomes, many of which are ongoing and we've spoken about. So that is definitely there for your reference if you would like. Employee wellness programs support a workplace environment where employees can feel supported, valued, and motivated to contribute their best. And it's ultimately going to have an impact on the needs of our students. We've talked before about the reciprocal effect of student needs and staff needs. When staff needs are met, it's going to have a positive impact on the students. And the opposite is true. When the student needs are met, it's going to have a positive impact on the teacher and the employees that student interacts with. You've heard me talk about 8 dimensions of wellness in the past. We took a really close look at our data that we get from Florida Blue and our other medical providers, as well as trends across the state, and also, very importantly, our employee interest surveys. We had around 800 complete the survey the last time, and we've identified 4 core dimensions of wellness that we're really going to focus on, and we feel that would move the needle, which is physical, emotional, social, and financial, and that will interact with the other dimensions. And this is going to help us support district strategic Plan Pillar 3.1 on recruiting, recognizing, and retaining talent, as well as 3.2, which is employee engagement. There's a lot of data out there that shows that well-being initiatives do lead to higher levels of engagement, which is directly tied to retention. This is kind of hard to read on the screen. So this is just comparing our compliance to annual preventative screenings last year to the year before. And as we have in years past, we continue to exceed the Florida Blue benchmark for all of those screenings. We finally met our 3-year goal at the end of 3 years of providing the health screenings at all of the schools, and we continue to see increased engagement in those activities. Our mobile mammography program continues, and with each year we see more and more participation. So comparing the last year, we saw a 20% increase in district-sponsored wellness initiative engagements, and we do a survey at the conclusion of our activities and saw about a 96% satisfaction rate with what we are offering. So looking ahead to 24-25, to further support a culture that motivates, empowers, and engages employees, we are looking at various wellness platforms and what they have to offer. They're all a little bit different, but we do want one that aligns with the data that we have and our employee interest surveys. And with this, we will see increased engagement in these activities. So specifically classes, nutrition, tracking, chronic disease management, those sorts of things. This is not meant to replace anything, but it would supplement what we're offering. And we do anticipate a higher engagement in this type of platform because it will allow employees to engage in what they want to when they want to. You know, there was a time where we'd offer a yoga class, people would come, and then we saw a big shift around the pandemic afterwards, and people really wanting to do what makes sense for them. And so this would also allow us to integrate some of our other apps into this one app. So an employee could go do an activity, but they could also connect to Florida Blue. They could connect to Delta Dental. It would help bring everything together. So that is what we're currently exploring right now.
Right. And we'll be able to put our benefit portal on that so that it's everything in one place for not only, they won't have to go into the benefit portal to go find some information on Florida Blue if they feel like they want to go directly out, although the link is there in the benefit portal for all of our providers. They will also have a tile in there that they can, save their passwords and everything. So it'll be a little bit easier for them if they frequent some of those. Any questions? Great. Thanks, Erin. Okay, moving on to the medical and pharmacy. So this slide, you've seen this before. We've changed it a little bit just to kind of make it a little more meaningful since we've become self-insured. And so the savings from all of the programs that we've put in place throughout that time period is pretty significant. And it's you can also see the savings of each of the programs within the tiles, so a little bit easier to read and shorter, concise for this presentation. But what I want to note is that the new programs that we put in place in '24 for Surgery Plus, we expected a slow utilization because people need to get to know what it is, and they need a surgery. Not everybody needs a surgery, so that not everybody can utilize that benefit. But with the communication ramping up a little bit more, and people talking about it, we are finding that people are understanding what it is because it is a separate network. We have seen now. The updated information I just got the other day through July is $75,000 net savings. So we, are moving in the right direction. So that's very good news. I also wanted to point out that Teladoc Care 360 that we put in place, that we've got good utilization. There's been about 94 visits, and 33% of those had no primary care provider. So that's pretty interesting, and I think we're serving that need for what we need. We had some hiccups in the beginning, and we've worked through those. I think we've fixed.
Do you mean the 3 doctors in 1 month that I had, and I complained vigorously to you?
Yes.
That would be
Yes.
me at the beginning. Thank you.
Well, anytime you implement a program, there's always some, roadblocks or things that you need to fix. Right. No, I wasn't glad it was him. And then also just pointing out that, we would be over $100 million in medical if we hadn't done what we've did years back. So that's why I just like to keep this, it is a good thing that we went self-insured long ago. Okay, moving on to the pharmacy. So we'd like to, pharmacy is very expensive. We spend a lot of money, as you can see. And so using the Marsh coalition that we are in, Marsh does reprice. They negotiate with ESI every year to make sure that we are getting the best pricing. And so with that, what they do is they'll run our claims through. So they'll run our claims through the new pricing. So they are able to show that our 23 pricing is a better deal than what we had in 22. So I'm going to let Ellen, if she wants to add to that, but we have saved our improved pricing $1.4 million just over that last year from those negotiations that Marsh did.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. The only thing to add is, as Lynn said, I don't want to, there's a lot of numbers on that slide, so I wouldn't want to read all of those to you, but we do make sure that we are continually negotiating with ESI as the PBM to improve the pricing terms and make sure that we're optimizing spend for the school district. We are also monitoring programs that are put in place. A good example is Save On Specialty Program, which allows the school district as well as its members to take advantage of manufacturers' dollars that are available to offset the high cost of the prescription drugs. So that's been a really successful program as well.
Thank you. So moving on to 24, again, for what is projected for the 24 pricing, we are still moving in the right direction with the improved pricing anticipated savings. Year to date right now is $126,000 or 1.3%. And again, through 24, the savings for the Save On programs up to $750,000. So we will see an increased savings, I believe, in 24. So we'll continue to monitor that. Any questions with that? Moving on. So our biggest impact that we and a lot of plans are seeing are with the GLP-1s, or they're actually glucagon-like peptide. These drugs were brought onto the market to help with diabetes. They are able to help lower the blood sugar for those with diabetes. And so with that, throughout the use, they noticed that these particular drugs were causing allowing for weight loss over the time. So the FDA did approve some weight loss drugs that were put into the market. These weight loss drugs, and you can see on this slide in the orange, those are the 3 drugs that were approved, and probably the one that's most recognizable is Wegovy. They're really doing a big push with advertising for that. So, yeah. So, Zepbound is newer, and so this is the newest one on the market, and that is seeing significant increases because it shows a little bit more weight loss ability there. So with that, we're seeing high demand for these drugs because they're being advertised. And right now, with what we have in place, we have very few guardrails in place for the weight loss drugs. So we see this as an issue, and I'm going to go to the next slide so that you can see the significant impact to our medical plan, our pharmacy plan. And I know it's difficult to read, but what I can point out to you is that it's $2.8 million for both the GLP-1s for diabetes and weight loss. That's what our plan is paying. And that amount is about 12% of our pharmacy plan that we're paying. So it is significant. You can also see the increases of this in just from 22 to 23. Mounjaro is for diabetes, and you can see that that's become very popular. If you look under the plan change cost, it's 1,155% increase in Mounjaro, resulting in being cost of $800,000 to the plan. And then Wegovy, that one is a 377% increase, and that is continuing to go up. You can see that Zepbound is in there, but it doesn't really have the utilization right now, but we will see that for 2024, and these are 23 full year results. So with that, that amount of $2.8 million is 3.7% of our total medical spend, a total plan spend. So it's very significant, and one that most plans are struggling with right now with what can we put in place to put the guardrails in place and to help. So as we've looked at a few options, ESI, which is Express Scripts, has one that they can help manage, and it is called Encircle. This is for the diabetes and weight loss to put a little bit more tighter guardrails in place so that not just anybody can go in and say that they need, a weight loss drug. There has to be criteria they need to meet in order to do that. So they're increasing for the weight loss. They're increasing the current 30 BMI to like a 32. So as you can see here, I think the spend for this will come back with, reward and return on our investment with making sure that we are monitoring this for our members. Anything that I missed there?
Nothing you missed. The only thing I would add is I think it's extremely important not just to make sure that the medication's being dispensed and approved for the right individual, but then also supporting the individual to make sure that all of the success that hopefully they'll achieve by taking the medication is sustainable. And that's the important piece to this program that provides some support ongoing, as well as some requirements that the individual has to continue to meet in order for that prescription to continue to be provided.
Right, and this would fall right in with our strategic plan with supporting our employees, and for 3.1, 3.2, and also for financial 4.1. So this is something that we will be bringing to the board for approval in the near future. The next, I don't know where my presentation went, but the next program that we want to be considered is the OMADA chronic condition management. This is specifically for those with diabetes, hypertension, prediabetes, to give the member some support. And also, right now it's for prediabetes, but they have to search it out if they want. And there's not as many options available for them in the pre-diabetes program, but with this OMADA chronic condition management program, they will be getting all of their glucose strip, all their diabetes needs for free, and also they will be checking in, be monitored, and ESI will be OMADA will be reaching out to those members with diabetes to ensure that they have the support, that they have the coaching, that they have, that they're following up if they're getting poor readings. And so this is another program that we believe will be helpful to our diabetes population, which is about 550 people on our plan. Currently, we do offer our generics for free. When we went self-insured, we lost a program with Florida Blue that gave them their generics for free if they went through the diabetes program. So we felt the need to just give their diabetes generic medication for free so that they could be compliant and make sure that they stay within the needs that they need to be. But we know that they need more support and they need some coaching and stuff. So this is an offering that we believe is going to be very helpful. Okay, now we're going to move into our financial. I'm going to ask Jeff to come up. Yeah, thank you. You've seen this before, and you know that our plans are on a calendar year, so we split it up and show you what it looks like on the fiscal year. But for rates and premiums, we have to look at it on a calendar year to generate the new rates for the year to make sure we're in line. And I'm going to point to the calendar year last two columns, 24 and 25. As you can see, we've done better in 24 than we did in 23, where we had significant high-cost claimants. We do still have high-cost claimants. We have two of them, still that same one with the issue with the liver, and then we have a new one. But we have done better. Our claims experience is much better from the previous year. So we had a operating gain in 24, which is projected to have an operating gain, and then looking at 25, using those projections and the projections for claims, we are looking at an operating loss because at the current premium rate, we won't be bringing in enough to cover those claims, which we all know medical inflation has increased. That is there. That's included in that, as well as our high-cost claimants. So that is where we're looking at increasing to a 9.7% increase this year versus the projected 11.9, I think it was, in February. So we actually look much better. Any questions on that slide? Okay, great, because I know I'm trying to speed it up. Our 11208 is our required, being self-insured required reserve hold with 60 days of reserves that need to be held. And so this just demonstrates where we are and where we're landing at the end of the 24-25 fiscal year. And that's where we are. We have enough in our reserves to meet that 60-day reserve requirement. Jeff, anything that you want to add?
I would just say, even when you consider on the previous slide, particularly in 23 and a little bit in 24, you had kind of the perfect storm around trends going up, pharmacy costs going up, and then you have high-cost claimants, which it's difficult to predict for those. So the name of the game with these programs is revenue needs to exceed expenses. So that's when you look at that. It's not just about increasing revenue through premium rate increases. So that's why you see the healthcare blue books, the surgery pluses, the primary care focus, what we're doing and what Ellen's doing around pharmacy. We're trying to actually reduce expenses so that you don't have to just increase revenue. So that's happening in the background, but I thought it just a really unusual claims year in terms of what's happening in the marketplace as well as what happened specific to your experience. So to be able to, when you go to the 11208 slide, you do want to manage to that reserve so that you have that there in case it happens, which run into some of those high-cost claimants. But it is that particularly, in terms of compliance with that regulation, you have a surplus. When you go to the bottom line, you have additional funds there. We've tapped into it in the past, but not something you want to become regular practice. But so fiscally speaking, really in good shape. And in 24, the claims early on are much better than they were in 23. Yes, we still have a couple hanging out there, but overall, the claims experience much better first half of 24 versus 23.
Thank you. And moving on, just to see how we've done, this is our history, and you can see that, we're moving in the right direction anyway. I don't know that we'll see those low 1.0s or 1.7s. We can hope that can happen. That it's all according to how our claims will go and our programs. Just wanted to make you aware that we'll have an active open enrollment just because of pathways and having individuals that I wouldn't want anybody to be surprised that they have a surcharge on their plan because they didn't get their wellness exam. So we're going to highly encourage everyone to participate in open enrollment from October 16th to November 4th. And we will use the Aon enrollers, their call center. They will be able to help employees enroll, and they will go out to a few locations to assist in that, as well as our benefit fair, which is October 18th. We will be there to help enroll employees in their benefits, and they can visit with all the vendors. And then this just is a summary. We will see an increase in dental, a 3.1, very small. It's not that much when you consider what we pay versus what we pay for medical. The dental is a little bit smaller, but there will be the need for a 3.1% increase.
Ms. Marinelli?
I'm sure I'm not the first one to bring this up on Delta Dental. Mm-hmm. Seems like we pay more than maybe some of the benefits we get with Delta Dental.
So we run Delta Dental through, we use Aon. They will use our claims and make sure that we can go through what is current market. And we are up with what the market trend is. We have a $1,500 cap that employees are eligible for under that benefit. We really only have 2% of participants that ever meet that cap. Most people utilize it for their preventative care, but certainly our plan is in line because we check that every year to make sure that we are in line with the competition out there. And we're self-insured, so we're using Delta's network.
Okay. Then just a comment when, the percentage that you said that employees don't have primary care. I know from personal, many doctors are retiring, and then they hire and that person leaves, and then they hire and that person leaves. So the whole, there's so many people, it's like any other profession, education included, there's not the stability. And, when you have to go, you get to know your doctor, and then all of a sudden they're going, you get to know another one, then they're gone. You're like, well, I'm not doing this again. So I think that is a problem in Sarasota and around, but doctors are retiring, and there's not a lot of doctors out there that are coming in. And some are going concierge.
Right.
So That leaves the majority of people out.
And that is one reason why we included the Teladoc 360.
That would allow them additional coverage beyond the 1,500.
Not at this time, but certainly, if we want to include that, we'd have to run through, if the board wants to have that option,
I'm just curious.
we can certainly do that.
I mean, not necessarily that it would be something that the school district would pay for, but
Correct.
that we could provide, hey, we found this really great cost-effective option. If you think you're moving into the world of extensive dental work, you may want to purchase this.
Yes, that's always an option to take a look at, and we certainly can do that.
Great. And before I go to my other questions, I know that you work so very hard in making sure that our numbers are moving in the right directions all the time. I'm not sure you get enough kudos for that. So I want to make sure that you get them, that you do a great job. I trust that you've always done your due diligence and that the programs that you're recommending, including Teladoc, including the surgery. I mean, when we talked about the surgery program, people were like, huh, what? But it was a trend and you could see that it was moving in the right direction. So great job. You always do that. And I trust that you're always in that direction.
Thank you.
Question. I know that we had approved an option for BMI surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been utilized, and what are we doing with that?
It is utilized. We have all the guardrails in place for that. They have to go to a center of excellence. They have to be, with a doctor for 6 months before. So for the surgery for that, yes, we have that all in place. I don't have numbers right now in front of me as to how many members have opted for that. I know in that, like a few years ago, there was like a couple. But I don't have those in front of me right now.
I'm just wondering now with these drugs, if that is something that at some point do we reevaluate that and say maybe the dollars are spent better in another way if the trend shows that the drugs mean that people won't necessarily need that type of surgery. I don't know. I'm throwing it out there. I notice in Aaron's right ahead that that the biggest interest was for people with stress and resilience and self-care and mindfulness, all of which could lead to stress eating. I mean, so I'm just moving that right into those drugs that are so costly with us. What do we do on the proactive side if we hear that? Are we engaging our staff in an ongoing basis? Like, do you notice these symptoms? Do you notice these behaviors? Hey, we have these kinds of programs. I don't know. I'm just trying to be proactive here, especially since those drugs are so desirable.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to answer that? Go ahead. Oh, well, we certainly do.
I know. I'm just trying to find ways to save money, guys. That's all I'm doing.
Right. Well, as we get all of our interest surveys back and what they want in programs, we've put in a lot of mental health and support. And the one platform that we are looking to add also has all of those items, the fitness, the nutrition, because that's a big component. Those things we're trying to give our employees even more options. With the stress, we have some of those mental health Teladoc and all of that to help them have resources to go to. So, I mean, we haven't gone out and visited to talk to each individual, which is very hard, but we have utilized our wellness champions to provide the resources of all of those mental health resources to all of the members all of our employees at each of our sites. So we continue to advertise that.
And if I can, go ahead.
I'm just going to throw this out here. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but here I look at teachers who the number one thing that I always say, what do you need? Time, right? Okay. So then so how do I get to a stress management program? How do I get to an exercise program? So I'm just going to throw this back out to the superintendent, to Lynn, to Rachel. How do we incorporate self-care and those kinds of things more into the day-to-day, finding the time. Because if I'm a teacher and I got to run home and make dinner and I've got to get after school, that self-care just goes to the bottom of the list. And then how do we track that back to these drugs that people are going to be on, as I can fix this if I get that drug? So I'm throwing it back out there because there's a connection here that the teachers do not have time. They can't fit self-care into their programs, and it ends up in our healthcare expense. So, and I want our team to be healthy. So I start there. So I'm just throwing it back out there. There's a connection there.
Can I comment? What you're saying is spot on, and that's where that top-down approach is so important. That encouragement of, we're going to make time. We're going to help you make time. And I know that no time exists, but even just given the blessing to do that is significant. Even having the leader, whatever level they're at, modeling those behaviors themselves. I mean, that's where that comes into play.
And I think, some of the things with some of the Zen dens that we've been fortunate enough to get some grant funding and put in place to allow our staff to be able to just go for 10 minutes and decompress, go somewhere. This is what we're looking to expand, to just give them that opportunity to sit in a massage chair for 10 minutes, to chat with a friend, to maybe, relieve some stress. So this is why those rooms are very important, and why we want to continue making sure that every site has one of those.
I'm just going to recap. I'll be brief. I think you guys do an extraordinary job. I would echo that statement. I love that you put a financial impact on there. Those are huge numbers. And I know year over year, I know last year was very challenging. And I know that presentation coming to us with a double-digit increase was not easy. But I think it's not lost on me, and I certainly don't believe on this board, that there's a lot of work behind it, a lot of numbers. And as was mentioned, it really was a perfect storm. You can't predict high claims in that manner. But Aaron, you guys do a great job. I'll have to say, having worked in the insurance world and having all these special bells and whistles that come with the package, it's very hard for the employer to put those in front of the employee to actually take advantage of. And that was coming from someone who that's what we did. So just looking at these numbers are extraordinary. And I think that goes to Mr. Edwards' point of, if we're continuously talking about that, showcasing that is a priority, I think it's a goal that we want less people, not just for claims purposes, but just for pure health, to not be on medication if they don't have to be, and to do that preventative care. You guys do such a great job to allow, I think, our staff to take advantage of that. And I think the more we are able to, I think it pays dividends even when we talk about recruiting and retaining. So I cannot applaud you guys enough. So great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job, as always, except for the little glitch at the beginning. Wait, we're not going to talk anymore about the glitch. A glitch. Yeah, no, I'm not going to. No, I won't go there. Superintendent Connor, next up, please.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll have Ms. O'Day, our Chief Academic Officer, Deputy Superintendent, come up. We're going to. You want to take a little break? Yes. Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break and we'll come back.
Red Bull and coffee. That's okay.
him. I have all the great ideas. It's him who doesn't have any capacity.
Are my principals that savvy though? Right, we're gonna find out.
Plus, like you say, all the AI is coming into every conversation, right? I can't imagine. Here at home.
Did softball evaluations yesterday, so. Good,
I'm
good.
not a fan of that unless we're teaching people what to do when they
What's
have
that?
the option to turn it on.
I know, actually, that or swimming. Reagan's like, I don't know if I want to do
That's the
another
whole
year of
argument with
softball.
me with social media. You can shut it off.
Because she's at the point where now, like,
Teach them
she's
what
so
to
much
do with
more
it when they're old
athletically
enough
built up
to turn it
quicker.
on.
Now everyone's kind of evening out and like they're playing, practicing. It's like they're,
That's real.
yeah. And I'm like, and her swing doesn't have enough power. I'm like, I thought she was like kind of faux playing. And I'm like,
Now, it's our-
where's
I
your
think that's
power
our
on your
key.
swing? Like, you got to get out there. So that's right.
We'll get started.
Okay, if we would, we'll go ahead and get back to the workshop. Mr. Connor?
Thank you, Mr. Enos. Our next topic is centered around our state accountability data, the outcomes that we achieved over the last school year, and to talk about what were some of those areas of celebration, areas of opportunity, and our next steps. This also kind of coincides, obviously, with a portion of my employment contract, which says annually that I will bring the data to the board, and we'll discuss it and talk about what that will lead into, some goals and objectives per my contract going into the next year. So this will be the first phase of that, and then we'll bring forth some metrics moving into the school year before the October board meeting. We also have Ms. O'Day, our deputy superintendent, who will be co-presenting with me on the data. So we're going to begin to talk about state accountability. As you know, we are now in a progress monitoring accountability platform where we are measured 3 times per year in the state of Florida. We have been implementing that now for 2 years. So we are now today and beginning our PM1 window for this school year. But today's data is really centered around how we performed last school year. There were several changes that occurred in terms of how grades are calculated and the scales that are used to determine the school grades as well as the district overall grade. And what you see on this slide here is there were 2 separate ranges that were utilized this last year. Prior to that, it had always been one range, with the exception of last year where we had some baseline testing and they did a combination of things. But the typical range is what you see here in the elementary range, and they kept that intact for last school year. So in order for a school to achieve an A rating, they have to receive at minimum 62% of the overall points at which they're held accountable for. A typical elementary school is held accountable for 700 points, but with the addition of the third grade cell, which is a new component added, that was a total of 800 points that they're held accountable to. So that would be overall proficiency in language arts, overall proficiency in math, overall proficiency in science, now overall third grade proficiency, and then the gain calculations, which are lower quartile ELA, overall gains ELA, lower quartile math, and overall math gains. So where that changed for us last year was at the middle, high school, and combination areas. They actually increased those thresholds in order to become an A, B, C, or D. So moving from 62 to 64% is what you need at those levels to be an A. 57, it was a 3-point increase to be a B. And then 3 points from 41 to 44 to be a C. So you can see the differences. So it's a little more rigorous overall. So how do we fare out? When you look at comparable data historically from 21 to 24, you can see 23 was an anomaly of a year because it was a baseline on the new FAST progress monitoring assessment. So there was no previous outcomes to really compare. It wasn't an apples to apples if you looked at FSA to the new FAST assessment. So those calculations were not included because of the new assessment in 23. So when you look at the comparison of how we fared out in 24 to the most recent data, that's the yellow boxes that you see, you can see how Sarasota compared over the years. So overall 3-point gain in ELA proficiency, and I won't read all those numbers, but you can see there were some significant gains in lower quartile ELA, as well as lower quartile math, and that's really indicative of targeting instruction and personalizing instruction for students who are below grade level and really accelerating and closing those gaps to move them towards proficiency. On the next slide here, you're going to see, again, this was in the absence. If you wanted to do kind of an apples to apples comparison from 23 to 24, you would have seen that we made a pretty significant increase of 17 points if you took out those gain calculations. And then with the addition of the third grade cell, overall, the district improved a total of 49 points, which is pretty significant and much to be proud of. Our teachers and our administrators should be very proud of the work that they accomplished. What does that break down in terms of across our district managed? So you're going to hear me say today, district managed schools and charter schools. District managed being the schools that we oversee, that we have in oversight to help support, whether it's professional learning, whether it's doing impact reviews, working with principals, working with teachers, and then charter schools as well, which we totally do invite them to come under our umbrella to get support if they desire to. Now, we can't force that upon any charter schools, but we do have some that want to partner with us in this area because we are, as a district, making some significant advancements, and our charter schools, my charge to them is to get with the program too and be with us on that, and we would love to help support that. So because they are included in all of our calculations, it's not a separate. When you look at overall proficiency for ELA, that includes every student, charter or district managed. So we have a vested interest in making sure that they are being successful. So when you look at the breakdown here of our district managed schools, you can see that 95% of our schools now have reached the A or B status. And that is up from 82%. And prior to that, it was 77%. So we're making some remarkable improvements in this area. This is just another way to look at just the number of schools district managed. We have 27 A's, 9 B's, 2 C's, and I really want to call out those C schools because they made some significant improvements. Actually, one of them being Booker High School. If the cut scores would have stayed in place and hadn't been raised, they would have actually achieved the B. And they have made continuous progress, as well as Booker Middle School as well. They made significant progress. It just wasn't quite enough on the new scale to reach the next grade level, but they're well on their way, and we're proud of the work that they're doing. When you look at charter schools, you can see the breakdown here. This is just number of schools and percentage, and that equates to 71% of our schools I'm sorry, this is traditional and charter side by side. So 43% are A's and 29 are B's of our charters, for a total of 71% A or B. So we do want to strive to be that #1 school district in Florida. That's always something that we're working towards. And I think it's important to look, and this is no way to disparage our charter counterparts and colleagues, but it's really for us, I have to look at it from my level and from my point of view as the superintendent. I oversee our district managed schools, right? So the processes, the procedures, the structures, the support that we're putting in place, we have that autonomy and authority over, and we don't with our charter. So I think it's incumbent on us to look at that and see where there may be potential opportunities. When you look at totally at Sarasota County with our charter schools, where we ranked, it would have been around fifth in the state, right? And that's something to be very, very proud of. But we want to continue to strive to move up and to move up further. We did do a calculation by pulling out those charters, and that would have put us at the 4th ranking spot, so that would have been an improvement. But when you look at the school districts that are ahead of us, Lafayette, St. John's, Nassau, and Walton, I really got to point out there's some big discrepancies compared to us. You can see Lafayette is 2 schools, and congratulations to them being the #1 school district. But when you compare it to our 56 schools, it's a little bit of a different comparison. Also want to note to just look at the number of charter schools compared to the districts above us. Right, there's a total of 1 charter school in all 4 districts to our 15. So we significantly outpace. 15% of our student population is in that realm. And then, of course, you look at socioeconomic status, and, there's a lot of research that indicates there are challenges, right? Poverty brings challenges, and there are things that have to be overcome. And when you look at those comparisons, you can see where there could be some differences when you're making these comparisons. So I just say all of that to know that we have to look at it within context. While we're striving to be #1, it's not an excuse. We will be #1. We will push ourselves to get there. We also know that there's some realities, too, that we got to keep in context. Okay. Moving to the next slide, we have this just shows you where we are in terms of acceleration data. This was an opportunity, again, when you look at comparably over middle school and you see where there's a potential opportunity for us if we would have scheduled our charters like we did our district managed schools, there was a potential to increase in this area by over 5 points, which have been significant, right? So we're actually going to be working with our charter schools, partnering them to make sure that they're providing those opportunities to the middle schoolers so that it helps in the long run overall. Our graduation data, you can see here we're trending in an upward direction, and I don't want to reveal where we're at for 23-24 quite yet because we haven't closed that out finally, but I'm very optimistic that we're going to be seeing some good numbers in terms of growth in graduation for the 23-24 school year. And I do have to shout out all of our high school principals, Don Clayton, Dr. Green, I know anytime I list people, I start missing, which offends somebody, but there's a lot of people involved in this process, and there is meticulous tracking that occurs to ensure that every student has exhausted every opportunity to meet those requirements down to the student level. Our principals can name these students by first and last name, they know their situation, and they can tell you where they're at in the progress of making graduation and what needs to happen. So hats off to them for really owning that process throughout the year. And you'll see the results probably around December or January. In 3rd grade, again, this was really a highlight for us. I mean, you saw a 7% point increase as compared to last year, which was significant. This moved us into the 2nd ranking spot in the state of Florida. And again, as you look and you parse out district managed schools only, you see that would have went up another 2 points, which really would have put us right there at, I don't know if that would have been #1. That probably would have been close. And sometimes that becomes a forgotten conversation is K1 and 2, right? We have instituted progress monitoring at K1 and 2. Even though state accountability is third grade through 10th grade, we are aggressively monitoring these students to make sure that they are on track to be proficient at third grade. And so that's where our Literacy for All plan is really kind of emerged, and that foundation is being laid. And when we get to the opportunities for improvement and advancement, I'm going to pass it off to Rachel, and she's going to go into detail. So I won't steal her thunder in that, but just know that we are looking at K1 and 2 very aggressively and making sure that those students are on track. When you look across the accountability grade levels of 3 through 10 in ELA, you can see at every grade level, with the exception of 9th grade, we did see, we were stagnant in proficiency at 4th grade, and then we did decline 1 point overall in 9th grade, but there, if you look at the other grade levels, some pretty substantial increases. So we're digging into the data to look at, where are the opportunities where we fell short a little bit at that grade level. Is it a resource issue? Is it a training issue? Is it a pedagogy issue? To really problem solve how to mitigate that. In terms of learning gains, you can see substantial growth. And this is, to me, the most exciting part, is when you can see students who have historically, once they fall behind, it is very difficult to move students and get them caught up. And when you can move larger percentage of students who have fallen behind and accelerate them and get that, at least that year's worth or more of growth, that tells you that the plan is moving in the right direction. And even for our most significantly fragile or lowest quartile students, you can see some major jumps, just like, for instance, in 4th grade, going from 43% to 55%. That is trending in the right area. 6th grade, 38% learning gains, now 57%. But we won't be satisfied until we hit 100. We want every kid who is in that lower quartile to reach a learning gain. A little bit on the math side, you can see, again, we are looking at K1 and 2 as we move forward, and you can see the where we are falling from PM1 to PM2, some pretty significant movement there. And then, of course, at every grade level, 4th grade this year in ELA and math was one of those points where we saw not as much movement, and that's not atypical. That is pretty standard across a lot of school districts. And then overall learning gains, you can see in math, again, jumps. 5th grade, 58 to 66. 6th grade, 56 to 73. Some major jumps in growth. So again, we're moving in the right direction and catching students up towards proficiency. In the next few slides, really go into how students have basically the percent of students that were reducing in that level 1 and 2 group and now increasing in the proficiency levels of 3, 4, and 5. In order to be deemed proficient, you need to be at least a level 3. So the goal in this area is to see a reduction in level 1s and 2s and an increase in level 3s, 4s, and 5s. And the greens indicate that positive movement. Either we reduced at level 1 and 2, and that's green, or we've increased at level 3, 4, and 5, and those are green. So lots to celebrate there. I'm going to click through some of these groups for the sake of time, and we'll get into more specifically as we get into the advancement piece. So one of the things we want to closely monitor throughout the year are our student groups. And as you know, the feds have what's called the Every Student Succeeds Act. ESSA groups have been identified for our school districts, and that includes the groups that you see up here on this slide. And if you look from the year school year 22, you see the first 3 columns. You see proficient, learning gain, and lower quartile gain. In the middle, you'll see proficiency at year 2023, which was last year, Remember, we didn't have gains. And then this year, in the last 3 columns, proficiency, learning gains, and lower quartile gains. So if you do a comparison just from 23 to 24 on proficiency, you can see every subgroup, with the exception of our ELLs, made progress. So that's an area that obviously we've identified and this board has recognized as an area of focus, and that's why we created the Office of Strategic Improvement and Multilingual Learners. We're proud to say that we have secured a supervisor for ESOL for that position that will be onboarded soon, and we're excited about what's to come in that area. And we'll have a team of individuals focused on our multilingual learners through grants, and it's mostly grant funded. That's right. Same thing here in math. If you take a look, if you look at 23 school year to proficiency of 24, big jumps in terms of proficiency, but there's still a lot of work to be done. You know, you look at SWDs, while we made progress, we're still in the 30s. So more to focus on, which is why after my presentation, we're going to jump into ESC to share some exciting initiatives. This is an exciting slide. I know it's a lot of lines, but when you look at all of those subgroups, what you want to see is you want to see a reduction in the number of schools, actually, that are identified by the feds as not making adequate progress with those subgroups. And so, as you can see, if you go to the 23-24 year 4 here, you can see, and I believe, Rachel, this is SWD at the top, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if you look at that blue line, 37 schools in Sarasota County were identified as our SWD students with disabilities as being below 41% proficient. 37 schools, that's a lot of schools. As you can see, after last year, that number went from 37 to 17. So we're closing the gap with that student population. So we don't have as many, and we're still going to keep working to close it down even further. All right? That's a celebration. All right, you want to take some? I know I've gone through a lot so far, so I'll stop and take a few questions.
I just have on the ESC, and I love the drop, but I just want to know that we're tracking the students that were on the incline to see if we can make up some of the lost time that we might have invested. Does that make sense, what I just said?
Could you try to clarify a little bit?
So in other words, if we weren't doing a great job in those 37 schools and there were students sitting in desks in those 37 schools, are we backtracking with those students and catching them up?
Yes. So one of the main reasons why we were able to improve all of our student subgroups that were performing below the federal index is because we implemented our impact reviews, but the follow-up to that was their push plans. So after PM1 and PM2, we do a deep dive on data similar to what we do for graduation with Project 10, and we go by the student and we identify what is it going to take for them to make a year's worth of growth in year's worth of time, because that is that realistic expectation. If a child is in our school, there is no reason why within a year they can't make a year's worth of growth. So that's the first thing they look at. Additionally, what's it going to take to get to proficiency? So there's 2 metrics that we're monitoring. Then we create student groups that we are now using interventionists, literacy coaches, and our own teachers to regroup classes and provide interventions or to accelerate, because we also have kids at the top that are also performing that we need to enhance. So we do a whole restructuring mid-year to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the students that aren't on track at that point. That focus on our lowest quartile is why you see those student groups have improved, because we used very responsive instructional practices. Now, when you think about everyone else in all learning gains, that also improved because bottom quartile or lowest quartile counts twice. So they're going to be counting separately and again in our all gains. And we just did a significantly better job as a system, not just schools, teachers, but the whole system to focus and identify and making sure we're providing responsive instructional practices. So that's why we landed where we are. So those kids are monitored. And, just going into after PM1, our first principals meeting, we're doing a whole principal data dive where we are choosing certain grade levels based on the data, training our principals on what to do now versus what to do at PM2. So we're just kind of accelerating that work. Remember, we started a little later in the year, so some of the initiatives we would have done now took place a little later. So we are going to be catching them. Who made it? Wow, look at that rate of growth. How do we continue to accelerate that because they're not proficient? And then who isn't making it and why, and what are we going to do about it?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, a couple of highlights here. The feds do have 3 indicators when a school is targeted because there's significant work to be done with a student group. So you have ATSI, which is additional targeted support and improvement, TSI, targeted support and improvement, and CSI, comprehensive support and improvement. And all that means is based on what percent of students are falling below proficiency in that subgroup, you get those designations, and then the state actually has targeted support mechanisms where they come in and support schools. So schools that are labeled a D or an F are automatically a CSI school. And then the state will then have some very stringent requirements, and they're kind of in your cookie jar, and they're having a lot more oversight. So the goal is not to have these schools, right, that have these designations. So as you can see, if you look where we were in 22-23, the number of schools that were one of those designations and where that's at now. So we're moving down bit by bit, so we're making progress. There were a couple of schools in charter as well as in district managed that were added to the list. That means one of those subgroups popped in there. So most likely you can see it could have been ELL when you look at the overall data, but we have that data and we're monitoring those schools to make sure that they get them out of there as quickly as possible. When a school is not performing with a particular subgroup or student group for a matter of 6 years straight, which we do have schools in that, close to that. We have schools that are 5 years that have not made progress with students with disabilities. When you get past that 6 year, you are deemed a CSI school, which they treat you like a D or an F school. So that has implications for us as a school district. We have to monitor this, and we have to move out of that designation. And the good thing is, we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, can I add to that real
Yes.
quick? Okay, so when you look at that line graph, that was a few slides back, you'll notice that that's capturing data for 4 years before this 5th year. And there was a moment in 1920 where there was a little dip, one school, maybe 2 schools and a few student groups, but there has not been a significant decline at any point over this period of time. And as Mr. Connor said, it's a 6-year window. So when we looked at this last year, this was of great concern for everybody, and even still of great concern because we don't want anyone in any of these categories. We have the resources and the quality and staff in our school and in our district to not be on the list at all. So as Mr. Connor's referencing, when we look at, we have 3 schools that are CSNI and 1 that's TSNI, 19 that are still that ATSNI, which is that group that didn't lead to that dot going even lower. When we look at our impact review process, the student support services team is attaching themselves to the curriculum team, and we're going into those schools that are still showing concerning data, not because it's a gotcha, not because it's punitive, because you need our support. And we want to make sure we invest in you because the challenge is very challenging. And if the challenge is great, then the support should be even greater. So they're going to be experiencing a little different look with our impact reviews with additional staff with expertise, making sure we're supporting teachers working with specialized populations or students that are not performing at our expected levels.
Of these schools, how many of them are Title I? I know that the lowest quartile is captured in the data, but how many of the schools are Title I?
I don't have that in front of me, but I can actually, Dr. Hutchinson, I'm looking at you. When you come up, I think you'll be able to share that. Because we do have that information, I can give that to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mike.
So Day, I just have our charters included in this. I know that their whole level of services with students with disabilities is totally different. So yes, okay. What happens if they don't take up your offer?
So we'll jump right into charters just for a minute. Next week, okay, so obviously our goal, led by Mr. Connor, is that we look at all of our opportunities all the time. And we're never, ever settling for we're there or we're done. even when we're number one, there's always an opportunity to grow and achieve. And we have identified a need with our charter schools where when you separate district managed and charter, there's a disparity. And just like when you look at student groups. So that means, again, we have to take a different approach. The first charter principal meeting is actually next week on the 28th. And typically that's a very compliance, mandate, finances, the have-tos for the operations and management side of the house. And that's usually all that group experiences. Our academic team is moving into the realm of actually presenting to them next week. We have the whole half day to share. We're going to give a data presentation like we typically do for our principals on September 11th. We're going to do a data dig as well with their performance data to make sure they understand where those gaps lie. And then we're going to tell them what we do with district managed schools to make sure that we're achieving and moving the mark and moving the needle and share our story and also explain how they could replicate and scale that in their own schools, even though they're not district managed. Now that's an invitation, not an expectation, because the only time we own them is at the end. But we do believe that we have people in that room that want to continue to grow and want the support. So we're going to invite that. They're going to be able to sign up for an impact review, where our team is going to take the time, which is a major extension of their time, to analyze and sit and partner and thought partner and problem solve, create an action plan that, again, either you implement or you don't. But hopefully they'll see the value in the support and see the changes and improvements in their students, which is just going to become contagious. So we are going to start extending into that. It is an overextension, but they are our students, and the team sitting over there is chomping at the bit to make sure that we can address that and start creating a deeper synergy on the great practices that we're implementing. So that is one of the first things that we're doing starting on the 28th to address that.
But if they don't,
then, then they're going to have to take it upon themselves to improve their outcomes. And if that doesn't happen, then as Mr. Connor said, you move within the differentiated accountability process, which is not a process that anyone wants to be a part of. Correct. Well, it will end in our lap, yes, as far as the outcomes.
Just as we go forward, so much of this is it's not to disparage, but I'm all for transparency and being able to see things so that people can make the informed decisions that they need to. And something that you did previously when you were talking about the reading program and highlighting not only the new responsibility of our district to oversee that, but also making it clear that it is up to them to opt in and highlighting which ones are not. And again, I think those are things that I'd like to see us, and I have to imagine we would all support that, because that's just allowing, the way we broke this out, I think is fundamentally valuable for everyone to see, because, but for better or for worse, depending on how they land, we own that score. But we do look at it holistically as our students and as our community and allow the families to make that decision. But I think it's really important, particularly when you're seeing the extraordinary gains that the lower quartile, I'm telling you, I've heard that for 10 years and never seen these kind of outcomes, and I couldn't be more excited. And I think you drove into how you guys very clearly tailor it to the specified student. I think those are all things that parents will want no matter what school. And if you're seeing a school governing board that has that autonomy choose to go that route and their outcomes are showing something else, I think that, that's kind of the underlying value of the choice factor. I'm not dismissing the extra amount of work that it takes, but the way we're able to break this out makes it far more, I think, valuable for families. So I applaud you guys for that. Thank you very much.
I just have one last thing. I know we talked about this last year and it was too late. I personally would like to go on an impact review and see it, so I want to remind you, and then any other board members. I just want to see one.
Yes, and they start in September and they go all the way through October, and that is actually going in our next update to the board, is that schedule. And then all we're asking is that you let us know, because we want to let the school know. Whenever we have new guests, it does create a little bit of stress, but it's an old hat at this point, and we want to make sure that we have time to ensure. One, I will be there with you if you're attending, because I'm going to help whisper coach you through what's actually happening, so you know what they're doing and what they're saying, and just experiencing it in a way that brings value to you as well.
Okay. All right. We're going to move through the rest of the presentation, and now we get to some celebrations. We'll see if we can get the screen back up. There we go. All right. So significant improvement. The largest overall grade percentage point gain goes to the top three schools: Gulfgate Elementary, Southside, and Lamarck. Schools that had an increase in every cell of their grading component: Gulfgate, Glen Allen, and Brookside Middle School. When you look at English language arts proficiency and learning gains, we had 2 elementaries, 2 middle that increased 10 or more points overall, and 4 middle schools and 1 high school that had a 10-point increase. In terms of lower quartile gains in ELA, 4 elementaries and 2 middle schools increased 20 points, outstanding, and 7 elementaries, 3 middles, 3 highs increased at least 10 points in that lower quartile. Major jumps. In math proficiency and learning gains, we had 4 elementary schools and 1 high school with a 10-point increase or more, 5 elementaries, 1 middle that had a 10-point in learning gains. For lower quartile math, 1 elementary, 1 high increased 20 points in lower quartile, and then 2 elementaries, 1 middle, 3 high increased 10 or more in lower quartile. Science and social studies, we had 4 schools increase 20 or more points in science, 8 elementaries that did 10 or more points, and 2 high schools that did 10 or more points in social studies. So now we get to really where the rubber meets the road. Where do we go from here? So we talked about the data. We talked about a little bit of celebrations. We talked about district managed versus charter. We talked about ESSA subgroups, which we call student groups. And where is that leading us as we move into this year? Great opportunities for improvement. We touched on charter schools, but I'm going to pass it over to Rachel to talk a little bit about what the plan is moving into this year for curriculum and instruction that will strategically align to the Every Opportunity 2030 strategic plan. As you remember, there are 5 pillars here, and when you look at where we're headed in the terms of academics, we're moving into that first pillar of every student achieves, and then that branching off in 2 major priorities: expect literacy for all and ensuring strong instruction. So I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, so the great part about our strategic plan is it is truly the work that we're doing, and it was meant to have embedded structures and action steps that allowed us to be responsive to student data, that put systems and frameworks in place for us to work as not only a school-based team, but also a district team working in coordination to support teachers and students. So the next slide is really just an overview of Pillar 1. I'm going to give you an overview of Pillar 1, 2, and 5, just to draw your attention to the strategic actions that explicitly attack what we're trying to do when it comes to responding to student data. So whether the data is looking at an acceleration piece or looking at needing more progress piece, the practices and the systems we put in place allows us to respond to that. So you'll note the literacy for all. Obviously, we see that as our umbrella touching all things. If students are not literate, they don't have access to the opportunities and pathways we're creating. They need to be able to make those choices with all their tools on their belt. So if I want to do any of our pathways, I know, and it's not just because I can't do something, it's because I want to do something. So that literacy is a big piece that you'll hear us consistently talk about because it opens every single door for a student. When you look under ensuring strong instruction, you'll see the focus framework mentioned. You'll see high impact instructional strategies and support with professional learning, and you'll see PLCs. Those are 3 huge things. They're not actions, they're systems. That focus framework, which we're going to talk about in a few slides, is our vehicle to drive district and school-based staff together in response to data, partnering in the work. No longer are we sitting at the landings looking at data, talking about data. Not that that was completely what was done, but we are in schools. And I think if you ask principals and teachers, they'll tell you probably they're more than you'd like. And definitely. And their schedules, our program specialists and our chiefs are only at the landings on Mondays and Fridays. And that's because they actually have to meet and talk about what they're doing. And Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, they're in schools. They're in PLCs, they're in planning sessions, they're working with coaches, they're working with interventionists, they're walking with principals, they're looking at data with principals, they're making planning protocols, they're designing professional learning, they're giving professional learning. I mean, that is what they're doing Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So that's a big system and it's a lot of time. But it's meant to be differentiated for each of our schools. So although it's one bullet, it's a massive piece of the infrastructure that we have in place. When you look at the other highlights on here in yellow, again, it's just explicit actions that tie directly to what we're doing in the different divisions to support schools. When you look at Pillar 2, every student supported, again, everything on here is meant to support students, and supporting students means that we're increasing their ability to be successful. But when you look under respond to student needs, I highlighted this specifically because we are working on our MTSS process. This is definitely something that's been identified as a need for revisions, advancements, updates, and really just getting to a place of more feasibility. It's a little clunky right now. There's a lot of repetitive steps, and we have already naturally made changes to how we respond to student data with how we do our PLCs and our data sessions, our push plans, but really the framework used to see if a student is needing specialized services or not, that is under construction right now. We are following all state guidelines, procedures, and school board policy, but the process itself needs revision and improvement. So we do have a focus group that's working through that. That includes our curriculum team and our student support services team and our ESE department. And once we get to a place where we want to share, it'll bring in school-based staff all the way down from paraprofessionals to teachers. And then in the spring, we'll be looking at exposure opportunities for learning so that we can lean into that new process for the next school year, which also aligns to focus. Focus is giving us some really great tools that makes that process for teachers from paperwork to data analysis so much easier. Going back to that time piece, being more efficient with our time and our practices so we can still meet the same end. So that is something that is going to continue to support responding to students' needs. And then when you look under every community engaged, I pulled out two that really talk about engaging our parents. Our parents are a child's first teacher. They don't get left out of the party once a child goes to kindergarten and enters our school. So we have to make sure that we're giving them the tools and the exposure and the learning that allows them to partner the way that we need them to partner. So one of the things I'm excited about, which our first planning meeting is this Friday as an academic services team, the only person that knows about this is Dr. Moore. Now everyone else gets to know about it. Our parent university, the first one we want to do in the fall, is going to be called Literacy for All Parent Edition, where we're talking about, do you have a striving reader? Do you have an advanced reader? Do you have a need to advance vocabulary? Do you have a high school student who, you know what, the reading's getting in the way of these standardized tests that they need to pass? We have all these things that we're going to be offering and letting parents sign up for, and it's going to be at one of our high schools. We're going to work through some of those locations and how many times do we offer this on Friday, but that's one way that we're launching that parent university initiative. We want parents to walk away understanding where their child is and then what we actually do with them in the school day, because sometimes it's like, what are you doing with my child? What's happening? And then how do I complement that at home? So that's what that experience is going to look like. So we're really excited about that first launch for our parents. Speaking of Literacy for All, this was a visual that our communications department, the award-winning communications department, came up with for us, which I really appreciate when people can take what Mr. Connor and I's brain is doing and putting it on paper. And this is truly a visual that people will continue to grow to understand, but this really is our response to our literacy achievement gap. And when you look at the blue threads, the first three, high quality core instruction, aligned tiered support, and advanced progress monitoring, is exactly what every teacher and resource staff member and principal has to do to make sure we have high quality literacy instruction. It's got to be aligned to the standard. We have to have the tiered supports because not everybody responds the first time they hear or learn something, and we have to use that data to continue to refine what we're doing every single day. But that's not easy. It sounds easy. It's not easy. Going back to time and stress. So if we think about what professional learning does for everybody, professional learning is a huge strategy for recruitment and retention. You don't want to feel like you're not doing a good job or you can't do a good job or your boss has expectations of you that you don't know how to meet because no one showed you or taught you how. The professional learning creates comfort because I learn new things that end up working, and new things and new research saves time. But gets better outcomes. So we have a huge emphasis on professional learning, not only this school year, but what we did in a job-embedded stance last school year. Impact reviews bred differentiated professional learning at each school that was co-administered between school-based staff and district staff. And it was all about what do their teachers need, what do their students need. So those type things really are putting people in a place to have the right tools to meet a very challenging task. And then the coaching and intervention support is what we added for Literacy for All. Those coaches are huge. They're the champions for that work, and they are there to respond to teachers every single day. That support with an interventionist is really the perfect mix of aligning not only finances and strategies, but staffing to meet the needs of these goals and initiatives. So that's that part of the Literacy for All in the blue. The bottom in the green is how are we engaging as a district team, as a community, as parents to make sure that the rope converges and it results in these proficient, successful readers. So further looking at Literacy for All, that's something we're going to talk a little deeper about. This slide is really looking at the changes to our instructional approach. The responsive instruction, which we mentioned earlier in the presentation, the perfect example of that is what we did in third grade. Third grade, mid-year, schools, teachers, district staff really had a moment with that data and was very concerned about where we were going and not feeling like we had the accurate tools and plan to make a difference by the end of the year. That resulted in the district team pulling together, redefining frameworks, redefining tiered supports, and giving student groups to schools. And also, if you're in group A, here's what we suggest you do. If you're in group B, here's what we suggest you do. And then in a month, here's what we suggest you do after that if X happens or Y happens. That's considered responsive instruction. Teachers, all third grade teachers got trained on that, including administrators, and then our district team was in schools supporting people on that implementation. That was a heavy, quick turnaround. However, when you look at being number 2 in third grade and you look at the demographics of the other districts, those weren't barriers for us because we addressed them with advanced progress monitoring and responsive instructional approaches. Very high level way of work, but that is something we want to train all of our teachers to be able to do. You should have these practices in place at every single grade level. It takes time for people to learn it, understand it, do it with fluidity. But we do believe that we have staff capable, that once you're engaged with professional learning, resources, and support, these things will become a feature of habit versus something that feels like a strain. So that was huge. Our program specialists did an amazing job this summer working on refining those frameworks at each grade level, and also the decision trees, which are the resources teachers use in addition to their core instruction to make instructional decisions once they've looked at that data. So they've done amazing work. Kudos to them. Now, when I know a kid needs something, I can go to my decision tree and I can go to my frameworks, and it gives me that support, if no one else is around, to then start thinking about what my instruction looks like. When you look at the other side of that, we have a huge need in intensive reading. That's in secondary, middle, and high school. We're not happy with those numbers. We weren't happy when we looked at it last year. We did make improvements. We went up 4%. We reduced our level 1s and 2s in 8th grade and 10th grade by 4 percentage points in each area, which was one of our goals for Literacy for All. Continue to reduce the amount of level 1s and level 2s at 5th, 8th, and 10th grade for a lot of reasons. Transition grades, and also obviously 10th grade. If we don't want Dr. Green looking at those names, once we get that proficiency score in 10th grade, it satisfies a lot of graduation requirements. If we don't do that, we have to move down the pipeline of a lot more testing, a lot more pathways to get people back on track. So we did reduce by 4%, but what we added was intensive reading. In middle school, we added phonics for reading, which is a supplemental resource to work on foundational skills with our middle school age students. And we also purchased a new program called Read 180, not new in the world. It's actually been around quite some time. And we've partnered with Miami-Dade, who's had a lot of success with that, to learn the tricks of the trade and how they really utilize that resource to make sure that we're meeting the needs of students at that age who are not proficient. All secondary intensive reading teachers and high school intensive reading teachers had the opportunity to be trained on both of those programs. For the large majority, they attended. These were not mandatory, but they did attend. And then our literacy coaches in our high schools are now championing that work. So not only did they get a new resource, they got trained, they have the data, now I have someone working side by side with me every day to make sure that I can get that work done. So that's very exciting, and we should see results by the end of the year with our secondary students that are underperforming in reading. When you look at the staffing part of this, so obviously you have data, you have goals, you have initiatives, you have resource, you have professional learning, but we also need people. You can't just throw new expectations on people without support. Literacy coaches and interventionists, but mostly our literacy coaches, are that champion in the school for our Literacy for All work. They're making sure teachers understand the frameworks, the decision trees. They're getting in. They want to co-teach. They want to model. They want to attend your planning session. They want to give you resources. They want to give you professional learning. And it's not in a deficit model. That's a huge message to send. This is not a deficit model. Everyone deserves a coach. The job is hard, whether you're a brand new teacher or a seasoned teacher. Challenges change every year, resources change every year, needs change class by class, student by student. We have to lean into a strengths-based model and know that coaches are there for everyone for support. They're not evaluative. This is not a deficit model. You don't get a coach if you're underperforming. Everyone gets a coach. It's like Oprah. Everyone gets something, right? This is a positive thing. So we're really excited about our literacy coaches. They learned their student-centered coaching model this summer at our Literacy for All Institute, and they are ready to support our teachers. When you look at our interventionists, that's student, right? They're spending majority of the time with the students that we're identifying that are not responding to the instruction they're getting in the classroom, and they're adding that over-the-top support. What's nice about having one or more interventionists in every school, which when I say every school, I mean K-5 right now and our Title I middle schools. We have not phased into the other middle and high schools. That's a second phase approach. It really is lining up with funding. We do have high schools that can afford that, but we're starting with that literacy coach first and then making sure K-5 and Title I middle schools have the interventionist. But they're working with our kids. They're using the decision trees as well to use advanced progress monitoring skills to then deploy additional supplemental resources and programs to make sure that our students are getting what they need to continue to make that year's worth of growth. The next part, I'm not going to talk about ESC. That is going to be something we talk about next, but there's a huge alignment with ESC staff and the changes that we've made and how they're engaged with the work that we're doing, because as we always want to keep reminding, our students with disabilities are general education students. So they do not fall out of this framework. What happens beyond this framework is additional. So there is work that our ESC teachers and district staff are working within this framework with. But looking at our multilingual learners, which is very exciting, as we mentioned, we did hire a supervisor of multilingual learning. She does start on September 3rd, and we have 2 program specialists, which is exciting, and a family navigator who's actually been around a while. So that team is again, getting ready. They're excited. The first thing they're going to do is look at PM1 data. They're going to look at our WIDA data, and they're going to give school student groups, and they're going to design pathways for instruction that they'll train our ESOL liaisons on and get in the schools that have the biggest need and get boots on the ground right away. So that's really exciting, and I know our principals are excited. That's not been something we've been able to do for a really long time. When we think of all the people that we have working outside of the classroom, we do have a small army, which is great, because that small army is now leaning into a monthly PLC that we're creating that's led by all the people that have all the special skills in that area. Deb Jackalone, Heather Wasserman, Kirk, Denise Cantalupo, Jess Gardner, Brandon, Megan, Jen. Everyone is designing these monthly meetings, and our program specialist to make sure literacy coaches, interventionists, ESC liaisons, every single month are looking at data, leaning into best practices, thinking about what their school needs, thought partnering on the hard work, and going back with a plan and implementing those plans. But knowing that they're not alone and that we're all in this together, it continues to align that district and school-based team to champion that work and do what's best for kids. So that cadre work is important. We already have that scheduled for the entire year, where every single one of those groups has a meeting, and it's facilitated by experts for professional learning and data analysis. Because we know the only way to improve student achievement at scale is if we impact the teacher and the student, but also ensuring that that high quality instruction task alignment is there. Giving high quality tasks is not as easy as it sounds. There's a lot of work that goes into that, so making sure that we provide the resources and that teachers can provide high quality instruction aligned to the task will engage students at the depth that they need to be engaged to be successful. Everything I just said is why we do that. The last piece of this, the focus framework for advancing school performance, you have heard before. This is the main driver for our work. This does align school-based staff and district staff in responding to trend collection data that we do on the go in the school, but also student achievement data. The first thing we do, which is happening right now, is deliberate practice meetings where our chiefs are with our principals for 2 to 3 hours discussing school performance goals, reflecting on how things went, where do we want to go, and thinking about all the systems systems and structures that they will have in place to continue to advance school performance. That moves into the impact review schedule, which starts in September and goes through October. And then we already had our first Empower meeting, which was very exciting. We did that before the school year start, which was led by our superintendent, and superintendent's asking lots of questions about the data and also facilitating a PLC with our principals to learn from great practices that were successful for other people, because some of our problems are similar, some of them are different, but just creating that teamwork and then also getting the direction from someone that's been a CIO 4 times, and it's very hard to live up to, but investing into that work for our leaders, that gives him that opportunity. It's been awesome. The last piece of that is the biggest bucket we have, which is developing our people, which is why we're here. So I just listed a few things that go into that, but based on trend collection, student performance data, and impact reviews, our district team and all of academic services, which covers student support services and our academic division, are working to make sure that what we do is supporting the boots on the ground to then support our customer, which are our families and our students. That creates alignment and teamwork, which always creates an impact like we saw this year. But our goal is everything I said isn't different than what we've been doing this past year. That was very important, that we're deepening, not doing different. We've just added better resources and we've added additional staff and we've gained a better stance on alignment for this year.
Okay, questions?
I know.
Mr. Edwards?
They're kind of all over the place, but just right there, I love the end of all of that. Do you have expectations and goals connected
To what I just said?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I do.
Enough said.
Yes.
Because you definitely have the fabric woven.
Yeah.
It's all dots are all I's are dotted and T's are crossed. In the literacy coach, do we have an overall literacy coach to teacher ratio? Do you know what that is?
Well, we have right now.
Because I know you have it by school.
Yes, we do have it by school, so that would be the ratio, right? Whatever amount of teachers to that one person. We do have some Title I schools that did purchase more, right? They had the option to purchase more than one literacy coach, but right now, for the most part, we have one. But they are tailoring their focus. So in high school and middle school right now, their focus is intensive reading. And once we get that moving and grooving, they're going to expand into reading across the content areas. And a way to do that is working with them in PLCs. It might not always be individual, but you can get a lot done within that PLC schedule where everybody's working together. So,
And I know that's your philosophy, and I agree with that. My concern probably is more in elementary to middle about what that ratio is, and depending upon the size of school, I'm concerned that there wouldn't be enough literacy coaches to teacher, therefore to student.
Yeah.
So that's a question that I would have that we should pay attention to.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say we tier too, right? Tier based on needs. So you're looking and analyzing where the needs are and then prioritizing. So that has to take place too. So
Yeah, I get it. It's such a magical plan. I hate to miss being number one sooner than later by one or two literacy coaches. So I just throw that out there.
Yeah.
The stats that you're talking about in terms of the teachers, you are alleviating stress for teachers if you're through professional development, giving them tools sooner than later that make them have better results in their job. So I love the sound of that. And then is it quantified so that we can take that data and use it in recruitment of entry-level teachers?
I don't want to say we can't quantify it so that it makes sense when we're recruiting. I do think we can. Typically, when we're recruiting, the teachers typically ask in an interview, how are you going to support me? And a principal's response is, we have a literacy coach, we have an interventionist, we provide professional learning during this time. Our district has a professional learning catalog from October to April that does X. You get certain amount of points, right? Our SKIP mentor program. So I think there's a lot that is going on.
I'm throwing it back to you because
Yeah.
there's information there that you could say, you know, our third year teachers, our turnover went from X percent to 2%, and here's why.
Right.
And here's the information behind it. So I think there's gold in them there hills that we should quantify and get to HR.
And you're right, we will.
And then my last question is, when we were talking about graduation rates and we're looking at those trends, one of the things that I've always said is that my concern is that I love that you know those students by name, but I don't really want to just shove a kid into graduation and get them to, you know, check all the boxes and off you go. You know, I'm about every student having a plan and graduating with a plan, and not to coin a program, but to coin a phrase. When you capture kids' hearts and they get excited about learning because they have a plan and they know where they're going. And so I'm just asking if that enrolled, enlisted, and employed can also be tracked into graduation rates so that we can perhaps see that we started to capture kids' hearts in middle school, and it mattered into graduation rates. So I'm asking for that trend. I don't want to see us just shove kids, and I know we're not. I know we love them, and we're trying to get them to graduate and hug them along the way. But I don't want to just push them through the program. I want to make sure that they do get to us with a plan, and we guide them along the way.
I do think that's very doable with our school links. And again, like you mentioned, we engage them in middle school, and then we do know who's been accepted to what, who is going where. We do have all of that in a stance, so we can add to that, make sure that we clearly delineate out of those students that graduated who ended up really going to the university 4-year, 2-year. I think that there's a way to look into seeing if we can do that. It may not be exactly to the number, but we can work with schooling to see what can be done.
But we're also having less students that we have to pay attention to get them through graduation rates because we captured their hearts sooner than later.
Yes.
Ms. Ziegler?
Most of my comments were on the former. This is tremendous. I know Mrs. Rose isn't able to be here today, but I know data just gets her so excited. And everything that was covered today, I think it's exactly what I know we have been really striving for. And you do such an excellent job. Your passion's there, and I feel like she did the whole thing without taking a breath, which is amazing. But I know that you guys are working rapidly, but with incredible outcomes. And it makes me very excited, and I just really... I'm very grateful for the team that you guys have put together and for the energy and just the way in which you've approached it with our staff, I think, and even the students and families of like, there's no subcategory or whatever label you want to put on it that will prevent any child from being able to be successful, full stop. And I think over the years, for better, for worse, and I don't think from ill intent, but I think sometimes we can so quickly as human beings come up with reasons of excuses of why we aren't where we are. And I don't hear that from you guys, and that makes me incredibly happy, and I think that's really just going to keep moving us forward. So I praise you all very well. Thank you.
Ms. Marinelli?
Thank you. Mine are just comments, too, and what you've done in a year is phenomenal. You know, data doesn't lie. So the progress has been tremendous. So, and I know change is very hard, and I know our teachers felt it last school year, but they saw positive results. So it wasn't something that they were just going through. They saw positive results. So, and it's also you have the right people in the right positions. So it's kudos to you, Superintendent Connor. You know, I think you definitely were the right person, and the people that everybody in this room at the schools, I never really seen quite such a transformation in the school district like what has happened this past year. So the ultimate goal is our students are achieving. That's why we're here. That's really the only reason, is to provide the best education that we can for our students. And I like that you're reviewing the MTSS process, because it's got to be student-focused and not be a burden and have so many steps in there we're not getting the help that the kids need. And I think that also, through that process, will help identify needs at the school, and then you align it to resources. So I appreciate everybody. I appreciate the teachers, principal, everybody that's working so hard. Because I know the first day of school when I was, especially at Sarasota High School, that to see high school parents be so happy and give you thumbs up, it was it's totally different. Everybody, when you're at the elementary level, it's a whole different ball game. They're very happy, but it was in the middle school. It showed. Yeah. So thanks to everybody. I appreciate it.
And I would just piggyback on that and saying, obviously, if you look at just the data and you see where we were to where we've come, and it's been just in a year now that you'll have that year behind you. So this is what I see. What I see is that if last year was that good and you came in this year with them already knowing it, you only get better with practice. And I'm looking for next year that we'll be at least number one here in the state, maybe in the country. That's what I'm going for next year. So anyway, no, it's absolutely awesome. I mean, you can look at where we were with that, and, obviously everybody wants to know because, I get questions. All of us do. Well, why is third grade so important? Why is third grade reading so important? Well, because you learn to read up to third, and then you read to learn past, and that's why it's so important. And for us to have that, it's just really the amount of and as we've talked about is that what you've done is really you started fixing the systems, and the system being fixed, you put everybody on the same path, and that makes success. So, any other questions or concerns? All right, then. Thank you for everything. Yeah.
Yep.
You want to move?
You can get it in 40 minutes.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Okay.
Connor.
So our Exceptional Student Education Department will head up. I told you it was a packed agenda today. And they have like 3 different options to deliver this, and this is like the accelerated version of that. All right, so Dr. Kurt Hutchinson and Dr. Heather Wasserman from our ESC department and Chief of Student Services are here to present some updates around exceptional student education.
Yep. All right. Time me, because remember, we did this yesterday. I want to know where I end up. Okay, so we're going to take a little step back just to remember where we are with the program review. So when we talk about what we're doing moving forward, that makes sense. So I'm going to cover very quickly in less than 7 minutes where we've been in the last 9 months, because our program review is broken up by 9 months, 1 year, 2 years. We did accelerate past our 9-month threshold as far as what we started working on, so that's a positive thing, because our goal was we didn't want to take 2 full years to implement this program or these recommendations, because then that's just 2 full years of not having the best things in place for our kids. So when we did get the program review, remember we reorganized the information to these 10 buckets because things were there was some overlap. There was things that maybe were in year 2 that we felt like should be in year 1, but we wanted to make sure we took a comprehensive approach to the work, not just did a checklist approach to the work. So those are the 10 buckets that we realigned our work into. And then for the next 3 slides, I'm going to cover parts of those buckets and share with you things that we were working on last time we spoke and things that we actually completed and are implementing currently this year. So with the ESC department reorganization, obviously we know we did a full reorganization, which came into human capital, hiring additional staff, and it also came into redefining roles and responsibilities, which you're going to hear more about in this presentation. Then when we look at our staffing was a huge thing. That came into landing the ESSER plane, that came into our regular staffing. Everything that we wanted to do as far as our ESC reorganization, we had to take into staffing. We reduced our ratio for allocating staff by lowering the amount of student to teacher ratio. We were at, I believe it was 37 in elementary schools, and now it's 1 to 18. That's a big difference, 1 to 22 and then 1 to 25. But we were very high on the 1 to 37, and that's a very difficult thing for our inclusion teachers to have an impact on students. When you're doing specially designed instruction, it's really not feasible for 37 students. So we reduced those ratios. We added compliance coordinators, which allows our program facilitators which were formerly our program specialists, to really align into the instructional programming for ESC, but still make sure that our compliance side was under control, because that has to happen. Policy, procedure, state law, you can't let that go. But what moves student achievement is going to be when we focus on that instructional programming. We also added a continuum of services in all of our schools because we had the inclusion model and then we had the specialized program model, formerly known as clusters. We gave that middle to make sure, you're not always going to fit in one or the other, and we need the middle to help students that just need a little bit more intervention support so they can rejoin the inclusion model or work on some things to see, do we really need to go to that specialized program? So adding that continuum of service was also a part of that staffing. The big part about staffing is we really pushed hard to make that happen. We worked with budget and finance and we got there, which was huge because now we're implementing that this year versus waiting, which we could have waited and it would have had to happen this spring, then impact the following year. So it's great that we were able to reorganize, hire, provide professional learning, and implement this year because we should see the fruits of our labor by the end of this year as far as that phase one approach with new staffing formulas. So we're excited about that. Finance and budget did collaborate on the IDA grant that's already done and submitted. So that was great. Some changes in allocations, not only on how we handled budget and finance through the staffing process, and also incorporating some of our strategic plan priorities and pillars into the general fund. That gave us room to make some changes to the IDA grant and make sure that we're funding the right things and allocating the right resources. So that partnership did occur, which in the past we had some years where it did and some years where it didn't, but this year it did occur, and Ms. Pinner and her team were a part of that collaboration, that work on that grant. And I did talk about that programmatic offering. We did, in addition to adding what I had said we added, we also moved specialized programs because we had some clustered in certain parts of the district. Also, overwhelming schools and resources, which isn't good because we want to make sure we have appropriate amounts of specialized programs in all parts of our district so that you're not being bussed all over the place, and we are meeting the needs of our students wherever they are, but also that the resources at the school can be allocated properly. So we went from, for example, Lamarck was our poster child. They had 13 specialized program units. We got them down to 8, and there is not one school that has more than 8 right now. And we did add to other parts of the district. For example, Philippi, one of the schools we added to, Lakeview we added to, and that gives us more access in our north mid side of the county. So we were able to move through that, and parents were able to apply to stay where they were or continue to move into their different feeder pattern and specialized program. And we're seeing the rewards of that already right now. People are reporting happiness and success in their new locations, and teachers are feeling good about the numbers changing and shifting. So currently right now those impacts are being felt. As far as policies, procedures, curriculum instruction, and data and curriculum instruction, we're going to talk about that further in the presentation. So I'm going to skip that and go to data usage and say that a part of our behavior reboot and relaunch in the IDEA grant, the team allocated behavior interventionists. Well, we have school-wide behavior coaches, but now we have behavior interventionists where our specialized programs are. And that is a place every month in our PLC that we're re-looking at how we use TPS, how we're using the data to define who needs specialized supports and behavior, and then taking that back to the school level to support and train the staff. So we are revisiting the data usage and process. That is happening through that group of behavior school-wide coaches, behavior interventionists, and also Deb Jackalone's team within our monthly PLCs. As far as transitions, we did handle transitions exactly how we were asked to, looking at those pre-K to K, 5 to 6, 8 to 9. Adding the continuum of service has helped with that tremendously because it's not just your either inclusion or specialized program. We have the middle now, which really lent itself to having those conversations and making sure students were starting in the right place versus starting in the wrong place and having a really bad experience and not being able to have a successful experience within their first days and weeks of school in those transition grades. You'll hear a little bit more about post-secondary transitions. I'm not going to steal Dr. Wasserman's thunder, but that's an exciting initiative you'll hear about. And then as far as professional learning, that's something we're going to talk about further in this presentation. That's just a list of what we did accomplish. We really focused on the summer because it's very hard to train on these topics during the school year, during the workday when the bus is moving and I got to go home and I have all the things, right? We had a lot of stuff that was in the way of us really taking a strong approach to professional learning, and we used the entire summer to take care of that for every stakeholder that supports students with disabilities, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. And obviously, we talked about parent and community when it comes to the strategic plan. The Parent University, for example, Literacy for All Parent Edition, there will be a whole component for families with students with disabilities and how that piece pertains to them and how they can continue to support their child, just as one example.
All right. So
I don't know if she was less than 7 minutes, but I think I'm supposed to be under. So, all right. So I'm very excited because as part of our review process, we've had a lot of focus groups. We've had a lot of opportunity to really delve in with all of our stakeholders, including our departments. And one of the things that came out of it was really understanding as a district what our mission and vision was for ESE. And so having a culminating vision to where everyone understands and embraces that came up with it, embracing every learner, fostering inclusion, and maximizing potential to transform lives, which I think really falls in line with our strategic plan. And it's something that we continue to bring up in every training that we have with all of our stakeholders. And then when we look at the mission statement, this was something, again, our focus group really helped to devise and kind of align. And this is just, it's a great message. Our mission is to create a future where all learners emerge as empowered and successful individuals by embracing the belief that every student has the right to an education, ensuring that no potential goes undiscovered or untapped. And that is the passion that we have in our department, that we are working collectively with all of our stakeholders to really embody that and see the fruits of the labor, and it's really exciting to be part of. All right, so you've heard a lot about the restructure and the organization, and it's not just about the people, because that is really, really important. And so having the right people in the supports allows us the opportunity to provide that support to our schools and to make sure that we're aligning that. So we wanted the systems and procedures to be consistent and align as well and have a lot of intentionality behind it. So when you look at this slide, there are 3 examples of some things that we wanted to highlight for you as to what we've done. When we talk about, I think Chief O'Day did an amazing job of kind of talking about how we're providing the support in the schools. We want to be intentional and make sure that people know who to contact and how to contact. And as we're doing these impact reviews and as we're doing these PLCs, we really looked at our schools in regions. And so we made sure that we have a collective group. And so when we're looking at our compliance coordinators or we're looking at programmatical aspects, that we have specific people aligned to those schools. So that's been exciting because that's something that we're continuing to improve upon. And as we work with curriculum and student services, that's something where we're having those same areas. When we talk about continuum of support, we want to make sure that people are not siloed, that we're looking at how does my job impact your job and how do we work together. And one of the examples that we have on here is the district and school-based staff, where we have the ESE instructional facilitators and then we have our program facilitators in addition to our compliance coordinators. We know that there's going to be some level of overlap, but really figuring out how do we work together to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our students, our staff, and our schools. And again, staying within the realm of compliance, but really shifting our focus into that instructional lens, because our goal is that all of our students are going to close that achievement gap and be successful, empowered learners when they graduate high school. When we look at the last item at the top, one of our really exciting outcomes that is a trend, and you're going to see a few more items that we've gone through, is what we've considered the workflows. As we have learned through our focus groups, how an IEP was developed at one school was a different process from another school, and really aligning and defining whose role and responsibility was the important kind of pivotal piece, and that there was consistency and fidelity across the schools has really helped not only our staff understand whose role and responsibility, because clarity is kindness, and making sure that there's a good understanding, but also that it was consistent from school to school, and that administrators and support staff can then go in and really kind of help guide and coach if there is an area that needs to be. So the workflow has been something that we're taking beyond just an IEP and looking at our processes and procedures to really systematize across the district.
And we do have for you all just some parting gifts as we leave, which have some of these full examples that are in there for you to peruse through.
Additionally, when you look on each slide, you'll note that we are crosswalking the program reviews recommendations. All those decimal numbers refer back to a recommendation.
Yes. All right. So our team has been extremely busy over the last 9 months collaborating with all of the other departments, but we had some buckets that we wanted to just highlight as well, because again, we want to make sure that our communication is clear with our stakeholders, and we want to make sure that everything is aligning. And so when we look at manuals, we provide very step-by-step manuals when it comes to extended school year, when it looks at, we had a new implementation of peer, looking at how we're improving and enhancing our post-secondary supports that we're utilizing for our high school staff, and then also our policies and procedures. And the student progression plan was already presented to you previously, but we're really working together to align. When you see the bucket in the middle, that's the workflows, you can see that not only have we looked at strategically and intentionally supporting the process for IEPs, but those are the ones that have been developed thus far. And every time we go through anything that's a system or procedure, I think I want to have a line that's going to be hashtag, there's a workflow for that. So really helping to make sure that we have consistency and communication for our stakeholders. And then for our resource guides, for our administrators, it's really important that we're providing them the tools and the knowledge so that they can help understand what the expectation is for those roles and responsibilities, but to be able to help guide and coach our teachers as we're in the school and working through those processes.
So when we look at curriculum frameworks, we did talk about decision trees and frameworks that were modified to ensure that we had pathways for aligned tiered supports embedded in best practice, as well as specific routes for our teachers that are working with our students with disabilities and also our multilingual learners. But a different thing that we also did was we purchased TeachTown, which is specifically for our SAIL classrooms, which are students that are on access points. And that is something that they're implementing right now. They had professional learning on it, they're implementing it, and then our program facilitators working at the district level are also in there coaching, modeling, and supporting and making sure that our teachers feel comfortable. After implementing that program for a full year, along the way, we're identifying where was it not enough to accelerate my student and where was it not enough to maybe scaffold further. That's going to lead to the development of frameworks, because the review does call for frameworks, but you can't create frameworks until you see where the needs are, because frameworks are supposed to lift and improve that resource where it's falling short. So we will have a focus group and a team that will work on the frameworks for our SAIL classrooms after the conclusion of this year. Professional learning, Dr. Wasserman's going to talk about what we did with our program facilitators and our instructional facilitators at the school level in a four-day week this summer, as well as a little bit about our Student Support Services Institute. But what I wanted to share was during pre-week on Wednesday, we did have a day where we had a pathway for every stakeholder working with students and a pathway for our teachers working with our students with disabilities, but also our paraprofessionals, which isn't something that we've had before. So that's really exciting that we were able to get with them and get them ready for the students they're supporting, working with the teachers, the curriculum and the goals, and maybe also behavior supports that they would have to be managing. That was very exciting. That was something that the review called for. Ongoing peer and mindset, that is, the peer is that new system that we have where it stores our 504s and our IEPs. So making sure that our staff knows where to go and what to do, similarly to what we had to do with focus. And then mindset is what we use to certify our staff when we have to use de-escalation strategies with students that may come into crisis. So that's something we have to do annually. And then we use a lot of other discretionary projects, as you can see them listed there, CARD, Fiddlers, Fin. And what the team does is when we go to impact reviews and we identify a need, we use those discretionary projects to create professional learning pathways very specifically designed, sometimes for one person, sometimes just for one grade level, and sometimes all grade levels in programs. It really depends on what's going on, and it's a really great partnership that we have to do some additional strategic professional learning aligned to our students with disabilities stakeholders.
So this summer we had an amazing week. It was the first time ever that we were able to have 4 days with our school-based staff and our district staff. So if you look at the slide, in white is the ESE instructional facilitators, which are the school-based, and then we had our district compliance and program facilitators. And this was an amazing week that we had a lot of information, but it was to help collaborate. They came together, they learned, they planned, they had an ability to really have a strong foundational start to the year, learning like the new roles and what this was going to look like as they move into the beginning of the year. This gave not only the connection for them at the district level, but as we moved through the week, we had some district staff that came in, and they were looking at those actionable steps to take away to work with their administrator at the schools. So they had an action plan that they would go back, connect with their administrator to help kind of problem solve what are the unique needs for each school, because it is not a carte blanche. Everybody has the same needs. Every school is in a different place and space, and the unique needs are different at each school. So that was really an exciting time for them to do that. And the big focus that we had, which was I think unique to what we've been doing, is having a laser focus on instruction. So as you can see, there's 4 buckets there. We had a large emphasis on data. We had Jessica Gardner come and really dig into performance matters. The staff were able to kind of have a plan in terms of how can I help look at the needs of our students, bring that to the table as I'm working with staff, families, looking at IEPs and goals and trying to help with that intervention process. On the last day, we had a whole day just designated for Literacy for All. Rachel Chappell came and presented, and they had great collaboration discussions, and it really was information that they found extremely beneficial and a new way to look at their role as they become partners in problem solving at the school level. And of course, we've stemmed this back to the IEPs and how the implementation and what this could look like. And through all of it, interweaving how our strategic plan really aligns to what we're doing, what our vision is, what our goals are, and how their actionable impacts can be. And then compliance is always a non-negotiable. As you heard, Peer is a new platform, which we're extremely excited. We are district number 65 out of 67 to join the state-managed website for Peer. And so this allows us access for any student that were to come from in-state within 24 hours, as well as any legislative updates. They will be now handled with the state and will be an immediate impact to our schools and our staff. So that is that's a huge win for us. And then, of course, Focus, that is new. So that was something that we had to have some training embedded in for that, as well as the other 2. We always follow IDEA state guidelines and our policies and procedure review. All right. So one of my favorite events of the summer was our Student Support Services Summer Institute. And as you can see, we mirrored the Olympic theme, Champions for Excellence. Thank you to anybody who was able to come to that. It was really an amazing opportunity for our staff. It gave all of our stakeholders that strong start to the year. It was motivating. It was inspirational. And it did follow the recommendation 1.3 from the review. We had 2 amazing book and keynote speakers. The one started off with just the amazing inspiration, embodying every student every day, just believing that every student has the ability to achieve given the right supports and the right encouragement. And then ending with Marky Freeman, who really had that we are the bridge, that our roles, that we're the bridge to really provide that support to help them kind of get across that line. So kind of overcoming those adversities. You can see that we had a lot of offerings for all of our staff, from paraprofessionals, which was the first time that we've ever had paraprofessionals there. It was a 3-day event. We had counselors, administrators. We had a pathway for anybody and everybody to go through this. We had 85 presenters, 87 offerings, and over 600 attendees at the Institute. The feedback we got was overwhelming, and it was absolutely outstanding. So really excited about that.
It was awesome. And to continue on that was, like Dr. Wasserman said, that is the strong start. And what we will now do is continue to offer the ongoing support. So if we learn something new, what does that ongoing support look like, which could come from a program facilitator at the district level or an instruction facilitator within their school? Because remember, they come to those monthly PLCs to continue to grow so they can support their stakeholders in the school. And then we'll also have some defined professional learning that will come into our October to April professional learning catalog. And then we will continue to work with our data and our interventionists and our literacy coach, which converge also with our ESE staff. They are, like Dr. Wasserman said, the 4-day week. They got to get to know Literacy for All and know that they're not on the outside of that, they're on the inside of that, and that they will extend their support for students starting at that Literacy Literacy for All core. And so it is going to be ongoing. Additionally, our SLPs, our OTs, we're involving them. We have purchased new resources that they will also utilize as intervention pieces that line up with improving literacy rates as well, which is also very exciting. And we can add more detail to that in a future update as we get into that.
And then as Ms. O'Day had said, kind of focusing on that ongoing professional learning and the cadre aspect that she had discussed earlier. It's on. It's on. Okay. Yeah. And the cadre just kind of concept that she had discussed earlier, we are being very intentional with the work that we are engaging in when it comes to professional learning. And so in order for all of that to kind of come together, and I mean, we can just, I think if we reflect back over the last year and the work that Dr. Wasserman and her team have done to get to where we are right now, one of the pieces that we recognize is just so important and so layered is the communication aspect of that. And so we are very intentional. There are under student support services, there are 5 different departments, and you can imagine that could be 5 different communications and then all the way down. Well, we are being very intentional about how we are just honing that communication together so that there is a true synergy between the work that's happening within our entire division. So if you kind of view the slide there, you can notice that there are some green pieces that are highlighted. Those green are just kind of those large district-wide communications that we've had, and those have existed in the past in terms of our communication with our school-based administrators, our weekly newsletters, and our academic services meetings. Again, we are keeping instruction at the forefront of the work we're doing, so we have to make sure we're intentional in the communication aspects that we have so that that is making an impact in our classrooms. The other areas that are in white are either new or revised communication protocols and processes that we have. Within our division now with student support services, we do have weekly meetings. We have biweekly meetings where we are talking about the work that's happening and how are we able to support each other so that we are able to support our schools and it continues to make an impact in student achievement. And that's just a real important component for us because we know in terms of our next steps, right? We've done a lot of work so far, but we are not stopping. We're going to continue to move forward. And we have 5 specific areas that we are really, really proud of kind of our plan and excited to implement the work and starting with our professional learning. And again, we're going to continue what has happened. Mrs. O'Day had mentioned our October to May professional learning catalog. And so we're going to continue to provide intentional monthly professional learning for our ESC instructional facilitators, our behavior teams. When we're looking at our academic intervention side of the house, we are being intentional with the work we're doing as we're starting to bring in academic improvement plans. We have this interdepartmental alignment so that what is happening within our entire division, it all connects. We've been very intentional actually in our work over the last year with our communication and collaboration with our curriculum department. When we're talking about our education for our students with disabilities, you're going to go back to something that was said earlier today, which is they are gen ed students first. So when we talk about best practices for students, that includes our students with disabilities. So we are making sure that the professional learning that's happening for our general education teachers is also happening for our teachers with students with disabilities. When we talk about our co-teaching aspect, we're working with some of the discretionary projects that Mrs. O'Day had mentioned. Like just this morning, I had a conversation with the principal, and we've already gotten them in touch with FIN, the Florida Inclusion Network, and they are working out a plan to help support their ESC and their general education teachers to be able to, again, continue to learn how to do this work better so we have a better impact on kids. Job descriptions and our onboarding process, we're being very intentional. As you have seen and heard from Dr. Wasserman about the job descriptions and how clinical we have become in terms of who is responsible for what, but more importantly, how does it connect and how does it support the work that we know is going to get results for our students. And part of that as well, just overall at our SCIP induction over the summer, we had an entire morning dedicated to what is ESC and what it look like in Sarasota County schools so that we are able to, it doesn't matter if you were a PE coach, a music teacher, or an English teacher, you got that same message, and it's important that that messaging is consistent in the professional learning and support is consistent as well. We've talked about our curriculum frameworks. We're excited to do that work next summer. And then our strategic plan, again, being very intentional about the connection between our strategic plan and the work that we are doing in student support services. So we've been very intentional with that crosswalk. When we looked at our strategic plan, Again, going back to what was already mentioned, there was an intentionality in pulling out some of the recommendations from the programmatic review. And so if you kind of take a look here, we've highlighted a number of different action steps that are intentional to help support our students with disabilities, but some of them are implicit. You might look at those and be like, wow, I don't quite see ESE written in that line. But so if you take, for example, the idea of, and I think Ms. Marinelli, you talked about it, right, MTSS and the framework that we have there, right? Again, all of our kids start off as gen ed kids. We may have students with disabilities who are receiving, specially designed instruction in one area, but still need tier 2 and 3 interventions in other areas. The worst thing we can do is say, oh, a student qualifies for an IEP, and then we rip all those supports out away from them and expect them to now flourish with less support. And we're not doing that. And so we're being very intentional there, whereas some of the others do talk about specifically how are we supporting our ESE staff. So we do have those implicit and explicit examples there for Pillar 1. Again, for Pillar 2, when you're looking at every student supported, we have highlighted a number of strategies and actions that directly support the work that's happening within the division. And then again to Pillar 5, when we're looking at every community engaged, we are excited about that. And we did get a little preview of our parent university coming up that our division is helping to support through our Fiddlers department and through our other departments within student support services. And so we're very excited about the work and, again, elevating the intentionality of the instructional component, because we know that that's how we're going to continue to close that achievement gap. And Mr. Edwards, just to kind of piggyback on your question about when we were looking at our ESSA groups, so it is actually split halfway down the middle. So 8 of our 17 schools are Title I schools and 9 are non-Title schools. And we are being, again, with that, very specific in how we are supporting during impact reviews. We are identifying schools that are in year 5, and we're differentiating that type of support that we're going to be able to provide them. So we actually, for our impact reviews, myself, Dr. Wasserman, the program facilitators who support those schools, they're going to be a part of that so that they can help build the plan of support around that so that there is buy-in from all the stakeholders and we are all very clear, going back to the communication component, of how we can help support our schools and our teachers to better move our students forward.
So before we move into the next part, I just want to say Dr. Wasserman, Dr. Hutchinson, the entire team has done amazing work over the past 9 months, over the past 2 days, over the past whatever you want to call it. Amazing work all the time, never shies away from a challenge, always lifts and elevates and gets the job done in an exemplary fashion. So kudos to you guys, and it's going to be a great year. So thank you for all your hard work. To further celebrate that, we are moving into a celebration. During the midst of all this, Dr. Wasserman stumbled upon an opportunity, and she didn't shy away from this challenge. This was offered to 40 other districts. Only 2 were awarded, and we were the first. So we earned close to $1 million in a grant to help with post-secondary planning for our students with disabilities. No one asked her to do this. I did not help her with this. She actually came into my office one day and said, I did this and we got it. And I'm like, wow. So I'm going to let her explain further about this, but this does take care of one of our review requirements, which is 8.3. So that's exciting because this is an opportunity for students that wouldn't have this unless she decided that it was important. So thank you, Dr. Wasserman. We did get up to close towards $1 million. That grant cycle starts July 1st and ends on June 30th. And we have an opportunity to renew over the next 2 years, and I'm very sure that we'll be able to do that, given that we will do the best out of the 2 of us that were awarded to shine and thrive, and they're going to want to continue to support us. So, Dr. Wasserman.
Yes, we are extremely excited, and when I heard we were the first, and at first it was the only one, and now one other one is just getting it right now, that was great. So anyway, we have all of our 5 comprehensive high schools. So when we look at the pre-employment transition grant, it works with vocational rehab and is meant to supplement, not supplant. So it all has to be done after hours because we do work and provide services during the day for our students with disabilities through our job coaches and through those components that we have. So the 5 comprehensive high schools, at each high school, 10 to 15 students each will be involved. So we're going to have 50 to 70 75 students. 10th and 11th grade students are the ones that will be accessing this, because we think it's really important that as we're trying to figure out what it is they want to do and help them capture their heart and motivate them to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, this is really going to help with those students. And so at each high school, there is a school-based coordinator. What is also exciting is that there were staff from each high school that were willing to do this job. So they, which to me is great, because they know the community, they know the students, they know the families, they know the administration, which is going to help with that whole piece together. And again, this is our first year, so this is just the beginning to figure out how we can grow this, because as you saw, there were 2 other years that we could also apply for. So plan on that happening as well. So it is something that is all year, throughout the year, and the goal at the end of this is that each student next summer will have either an internship or a job that they will be placed in. But I think it's really important to understand through this, there is specific curriculum and a scope and sequence of what we provide through this transition. We want to make sure they're ready. And so there are 5 components. Work readiness training is one of the first ones. And this is really designed to prepare somebody on those soft skills to what do you need to know to help just be successful in the job. And so this could be problem solving skills, interviewing skills, so it's teaching students those pieces. Then when we look at self-advocacy, that's exactly what it is. It's teaching them how to advocate for themselves. What is it that is their strength? How do I negotiate or assert myself in an employment situation? And so that becomes part of it. When we look at number 3 and 4, those two are really combined. We want to make sure that students, as they're entering the workforce, that they have an understanding of A, what are the jobs that are out there, and B, what is the training, and what is the possibility for growth. We know in our area right now, construction services is a huge need, and there's a lot of technical pieces that go along with this. We have STC, so that's something where students within this will also get opportunities to go visit. There will be people that will come in to speak with them, but this is tailored and supported for those students, and working with the high schools to help identify students. They are a student that would be applying for like vocational rehab, or those are the pieces that help as we transition into our post-secondary pieces. And then the last one is really important. It's that work-based learning experience. This is that real-life world experience, to be able to observe, to shadow, to get those intern placements. So all of that is what is taught within this. It is the entire year. It is a cohort of students. They will go into the summer, and again, with the goal of having an internship or a job placement. So we're really excited. Yay!
And more to come on that. We will update you. That was just letting you know it's happening. And then as it starts happening, we'll have a lot more to share. So landing the plane here with our ESC division, we have ESC policies and procedures, which we call the ESC P&P. This is something that we have to submit to the state every 3 years, and it has to come to the board for review, and it will be on your docket at the next board meeting for approval. Obviously, it's a very lengthy document. Want you to know that the state has already pre-approved it. It has been also collaborated on by every single division that has something to do with what we do with students with disabilities, and also cleared by Chris Parento. So that's just should make you feel good that it's aligned to laws and policies, because it is. I know, but sometimes. But it's a very extensive document. It's hundreds of pages. It is also a compilation of all the policies reviews that you guys have been through this year. They're in there. The workflows that were created, they're in there. Resource guides, this is just putting it all in one place, and it says this is exactly how you should be doing things when working with students with disabilities. So it has been updated in the ways that I shared with you. It is aligned to state statute, law, our school board policies, the pupil progression plan, which you've already approved, and the information on our ESC website. And then one more time, it has been pre-approved by the Florida Department of Education, and they also pre-populate stuff in there for districts as well. And it does cover, obviously, all of these different parts. And again, it's the fabric of our work. And we wanted to make sure that if you had any questions about that, because we know you read through that and we've had discussions, but just in case there was anything lingering that you had concerns over, now would be the time to discuss that.
I'll just say that I appreciate having it in advance. I mean, there's a lot, but again, we've gone through it through chunks. But in years past, I felt like there was a time where it was just more of a mechanical check a box. We've got to get this in at a deadline, and I don't know if there was that much substantive review. We're at a very different place, so I'm very. I just thank you so much for your work. Just thank you so much. There's such a huge, profound difference in so many elements. I couldn't be more grateful in this space. So thank you for your hard work. Thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
A couple of questions. First, on the Title I to non-Title I, how do you read that?
Can you clarify?
I want to know what is the commonality for those schools?
So I think one of the commonalities is what we are addressing right now, which is how do we systematize an opportunity to provide our schools with best practices when it comes to accelerating student achievement. So I think what you're seeing is that we have an opportunity to improve in that part of our work. And so our collaboration with our curriculum department, the Literacy for All initiative that we have in place is going to help us be able to address some areas that we just didn't hit the mark, it looks like, in the past. And because you're right, if it were just a Title I experience or something along those lines, then maybe we could have a different conversation. But I think because it's pervasive in terms of how it was kind of resonating within our schools, I think then it falls on us to make sure that we are providing, again, that system-wide ability to support our teachers in a very intentional way. And one of the ways that we're doing that is, and I think hopefully everyone has kind of heard that how we've elevated when it comes to student support services, our focus on instruction with compliance parallel to that. In the past, it was not that way, and so we've got a great opportunity, I think, to truly make a difference and an impact with the work that we're doing in our schools.
Thank you. By the way, I've been a fan of both doctors in different jobs, and now that you're a team, I'm really excited. Compliance coordinators. One of the things that I noticed about IEP meetings way back when I got here was that with all of the people that are in the room, and compliance being part of that, is that it confuses or overwhelms the parent, because all of that is going on at once, including the actual conversation about the student. I love that you've unbundled it from the teacher, and now they have this person that's doing all of that work. But is it possible to? I don't know if compliance or state compliance would allow for that, but would it be advisable or possible to unbundle the compliance conversation for the parent in a separate meeting, so they're just getting the conversation about the student and the instruction, and then a separate conversation about compliance?
So I think those are, I think I understand what you're asking. So I'm going to go back to when we talk about an IEP meeting, okay, an IEP meeting, there are specific components that are compliance driven, right? There are things that we can put in an IEP and things that wouldn't belong in an IEP. So those, I think when we talk about an IEP meeting, those are things that we coach and guide our staff to help make sure that there's a good understanding of the language and that we're not overwhelming. The hope and the goal is that there's other conversations that are happening prior to just that IEP meeting. And I think that's kind of what you're saying. And an ESC instructional facilitator doesn't need to be at every meeting. When it comes to an IEP meeting, there are required members, and one of them is an LEA rep. So that would be the person, which typically in the school would be identified as the ESC instructional facilitator. So it's really working together. And I think as we're increasing with the collaboration, the partners in problem solving, that there's going to be more team-based support with that to where it won't feel overwhelming. But I do know that the IEP process, there's a lot of information, especially as you get into middle and high school and you get into those transition IEPs. And our goal is to try to make it not overwhelming and really focus on what does the student need and how are we best aligning that support. So I think as we're working with our literacy intervention coaches, our interventionists, we're working together, that's going to be a softer piece, and we'll be having more data aligned to the interventions that are being provided. So hopefully it doesn't feel as overwhelming.
So what I'm hearing, which is great news, is that the process is elongated. There's work leading into that meeting and then work after that meeting, and that does make me feel a whole lot better because it always had this intensity, and I always got this impression the parent walked out of there with their eyes rolled in the back of their head, and that wasn't the level of customer service that we were trying to provide. Okay, so workflow, kudos, because you could have a diagnosis wherever the glitch is. The Easter egg of the day, how about that grant, that $1 million grant? Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations. And I can't also, I mean, the high school-based staff are willing to stay after and do that work. That's above and beyond the call of duty. Big thank yous to those people who right now are nameless, but we should find out who they are.
You will.
My question to you then, this is my last thing. Do you need community partners for jobs?
So we are, we would love more of those pieces. We have 22, you will have on September 3rd, a 23rd agreement contract where we are going out and we have to kind of pound the pavement to work with partners, with community partners to find opportunities.
Happy to help.
Beautiful. So yeah.
Give me a call.
Ms. Marinelli?
Well, I can't even really put into words where you've come in this year and I do have to thank my fellow board members again for when we all approved to have the study, because look where it's landed in a year. And I'm very anxious next year at this time to see the results of everything, because, I think my passion is the student support services, and I think that your whole department is really what touches all kids and all families. So I just, putting all these systems in place and aligning everything, I just can't wait to see that. But and I know I can't speak for Ms. Rose, but I know that, the whole systems and the data, and just to listen to everything that you've done and all the hard work with everybody, I can't thank you enough. And please extend that out into the schools and to the teachers. But the young man that spoke at the Summer Institute, he was on a commercial in the Olympics, and they kept showing that. And so I was telling my husband, there he is. That's the young man I was telling you about. So I thought that was just perfect. But so are we doing continuing collaboration with our two consultants? Did they get all this so they can kind of know the direction that their recommendations did not go on a shelf?
Yes, so when they know to watch today. So we alert them to watch what we're doing. Also, even with what Dr. Hutchins is going to provide you is just some samples and drafts, just kind of building that binder of evidence to the work. Additionally, they did provide us a menu of services, because what we did say was, we don't need help on the how. We have really bright, brilliant staff, hardworking staff that has been able to execute and do amazing work. There just may be some additional things that we want to be able to do, but we don't have the manpower for. So we're engaging with them on a menu of services, and one of them is to continue to build out our paraprofessional training. Because as the school year has started, we are now in schools. It does reduce the amount of time to create and build things that don't exist. So that is something that we're working with them on pricing to say, can you help us with this? And then when that's done, we will re-engage. We have another menu. So we're working through these little baby pieces to add those competent partners in helping us do the work that we don't have the capacity to do right now.
Well, and I think it's important also. It helps keep the focus, because we all know it's very easy to start going off of that path. So to know we have that, but I think our families are going to be very appreciative. And again, I thank all of you for that, and congratulations on the grant. That'll be fun to watch, because being in this system for so long, and now to see where this is, it's going to be exciting. So I look forward to reports during the year. So thank you again.
And I know it goes all the way back to even just look about the restructuring, the manpower, when we went and met with you and your staff, Ms. O'Day, just about restructuring, and even Bonnie Penner was involved, if everybody knows, just sitting there, being able to put all of the pieces together and then putting that on top, plus all the work that you guys have done, especially when we had one of the first was the ESC, and as Mr. Edwards stated, just doing the IEP and who was coming, who wasn't coming, what the federal law was, and designing just guidelines from there to this. Outstanding, unbelievable, outstanding work. So we really, I mean, I can tell you, I really appreciate all of that, because that's truly amazing what you guys have done.
Can I just add one more
Yes,
thing?
Ms.
Because I was so excited about, I don't know what I said at the beginning, but I do want to reiterate a lot over the last 5 or so years through just a process of learning as a board member and a parent from IEPs, and the part that Mr. Edwards touched upon, which I think is really important. I have gotten feedback, tremendous. It's just such a tremendous difference, that approach, which I appreciate you saying that the compliance is an expectation. I know Mrs. Rose would always say that too. That's a no-brainer, but we're going alongside it with not just the educational part of it, but also the customer service part of it. And I think the feedback I have received from people who have been helpful for my learning process, both on parent side and our tremendous staff, and I appreciate you saying that, because we have people who are very dedicated to our students and our families, and it is hard work. And they have, I've just gotten very, very, it gives me goosebumps, very positive feedback. But there's just a tremendous difference in the approach, and just the mission statement that you touched upon at the beginning, I think just wraps it all up. And so this really makes me so happy. I think even from a statewide, there was obviously and I don't intend to continuously look backwards. It's not my intention. It's actually just to showcase how far we've come, and it would not have been possible without you guys and your leadership and your focus and your tenacity. And it just makes me so proud. So again, thank you so much. Yay.
Okay, Mr. Connor?
Thank you. Well, board members, you have stuck in there for a long time this morning, but I have one more presentation that's going to be really fun.
Yeah.
It's going to be exciting, and it's going to be short. It's only going to be like 5 minutes. So hang in there. You're doing a great job.
Oh, yeah.
So we have Dr. Brandon Johnson, who is our chief of middle schools, and Jamie Hannon, who is our great new principal of, well, I won't even say the name of the school yet, because I don't want to steal your thunder, of our new K-8 right off of Lorraine and Clark.
Yes, I brought the weather today just for a fact. So I will kind of go quickly through the slides and just kind of talk where we are. I got on the job the beginning of June, and it was apparent that we needed a name immediately for construction purposes. There were a lot of branding opportunities, and so that's where we started immediately. So we established our naming work group just following school board policy 8.55. We asked the Boundary Advisory Committee. Sorry, here, you click while I talk. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. We asked the Boundary Advisory Committee for anybody that wanted to be on the naming work group. That's where we got our vested group of people. We had 10 members that were interested in participating. And then at the actual meeting in June, we had 7 members attend. So at that meeting, we went through policy and kind of ruled out a couple. Do you want to go to the next one, Dr. Johnson? Sorry. We ruled out a couple criteria immediately. A, B, and C didn't qualify for the name of our school. And so then we moved it, D, E, and F didn't qualify. So then we moved to A, B, and C. So those talk about a road or a street. They talk about a city or a geographical location. So you can kind of see how we worked through.
So you can slow down a little bit.
Okay, I'm trying to go fast. I'm trying to go fast. You told me 30 seconds.
Go ahead.
Do you want to go to the next one?
So, no, this one is important. That's why I'm making a joke, but Jamie knows. This is the purpose of this is really for even the committee to understand we can't just name schools anything, right? There are actual things that are in place to ensure that we follow the rules. So that's why I wanted you to slow down, Jamie. All right.
Okay, so when we worked through A, B, and C, the work group kind of threw out some names. Lorraine School was on there, Clark School, because those are the names of the roads where we are. We also talked about Eagle Academy. One of the community members brought up that there's a lot of eagles in the area, and would that be an option? one of the main things at middle school, especially, and I know we are K-8, but athletics and mascots are very important. So Eagles are already another middle school in the area, so that was ruled out. And then Sky Ranch came up, and that was one that was clearly agreed upon by the entire committee. If you've been out there at all, then you can see the picture that's right there on the corner that you turn to get to the school. That's the community surrounding the school. So our recommendation going forward is Sky Ranch School, so SRS would be our acronym. And then we moved into a discussion about school mascot, if our recommendation for school name was Sky Ranch School, and did some brainstorming ideas with that. So the Eagles were already ruled out. We weren't going to be Eagle Academy, and McIntosh were already the Eagles. Stingrays we talked about, and some of the discussion with the committee was, can it be something with an S? So it would be Sky Ranch School, SRS, and then if we had a mascot that was an S, it would also kind of flow there. So Stingrays was on there. Gators was also on there, but the color scheme is
I'd have voted against it immediately. I would have vetoed it. I would have picketed it against it.
Mr. Enos, I also went to Florida State, so
Thank you.
it's really hard.
Thank you.
And the main colors in the building are navy and orange, so it was really close to University of Florida, so we were concerned about trademark and all of that, so that was ruled out. Superstars was brought up, but that's still Brentwood. And then we kind of landed on the Storm, and it just kind of fell together. And the more we talked about it and how to make sure that it was an entire school community, K through 8, that's a really challenging area because we've got elementary students that we want, but we also have middle school athletics that need to be a little fierce. So trying to make sure that it is one school community and not just an elementary and a middle school functioning in the same building. So that committee really would like to go forward with Sky Ranch School and Sky Ranch Storm. And I have a million ideas to talk about, but I know we're short on time, so that's a different discussion. And just the last slide is just a couple ideas moving forward. Obviously, our mission and vision will be worked with the community once we know our boundaries and all of that. And then creating an actual mascot for special events. I think we're going to do a school-wide election that the kids can nominate what they want that to look like. I gave you some examples. The Tampa Bay Lightning have the Thunderbug, and so creating something that dresses up in the mascot suit at events. But that's where we are right now.
And I'd only have one question in reference to it. Is it reference to being sympathetic to Debbie, and a lot of your students are going to come from Lorraine Meadows over there.
Oh, yeah.
Has there been any consideration, or have you heard any kind of feedback in reference to that? Not to dampen the party. I'm just asking of whether or not that there would be any kind of consideration just because of Laurel Meadows over there that.
So we try to make sure that we pull committee members from the whole area. That's why we used, so really Lakeview Elementary, Ashton Elementary, and Sarasota Middle School are impacted, which means it also encompasses those neighborhoods. And so she was able to pull committee members from there. Clearly, I believe that did come up about, being specific to one area. But when you think about our criteria and then also the committee members, it landed still in a good place.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure because
Yes,
I know that those families over there, that there's still no occupancy over there. I mean,
One
they're
house.
still posting on one house.
Yeah. So right now within the committee, it seemed to be very positive. I will say the follow-up, just so everyone's aware and it's not taking place today, we will have a follow-up meeting with Boundary Advisory Committee that we will bring in front of the board as we work through that process with Dr. Kemp and their team. But this is where we needed to start. And Jamie hit the nail on the head. Colors, branding, it's amazing all the things that go into construction. If you get the opportunity, please stop by and just ask them questions because I've learned a lot. I know Jamie has learned a lot. And then we even had the opportunity with Mr. Parento to do, the podcast.
Yes.
So to be able to share all the information, not to mention, you can also go on our website and start to look at this information as well. So podcast information, and we'll continuously come out to update you guys on no longer, I guess, Lorraine K through 8, Lorraine and Clark, hopefully Sky Ranch School Storm. So appreciate it.
So Superintendent, do we need to be in agreement, take a vote, or it's all good?
So today's more of an informational
Yes.
session, but we'll bring formally, because we want to put signage and things on the schools will need to be ordered and all of that. So that needs to come sooner than later because that's a lot of lead time on that. So we'll bring something formally for you to adopt the name of the school and some others.
So I think the Sky Ranch Seminoles Garnet Gold, I think was more than appropriate. More than appropriate. Thank you, Dr. Kemp. Yes, Ms. Marino.
So, Mrs. Hannon, first of all, congratulations on your scores from when you were at Southside.
Oh, thank
the
you so much.
improvements.
Thank
So, and I know you're so good in data and you're very concrete, sequential from being an ESE liaison. but I think you are perfect for opening up this new school. And I can't wait to see what all you're going to do.
Yes,
and
thank you.
Taking all your years of accomplishment and using that, I think it's going to be a fantastic school, and the kids and the families will be really happy.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very much a team effort at Southside, so I just want to shout out to my...
Oh, I know, but I just wanted to
Yes, thank you.
acknowledge that you were a part of that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I do just want to say one real quick. I know we're in relation to, is it a negative connotation about the storm? And I think with any mascot, it's really about just establishing a school community and being deliberate and making sure students feel part of that. So it might currently be a negative connotation because of what's going on, but really creating it a positive experience for every kid. So I think regardless of mascot, I think.
Yeah, it was just a question
Yep,
because
agreed.
there's a lot of families over there that have children and they're really struggling. So
Yes. Yes, sir.
I wanted to make sure that we were just, that
Yes.
it would be within that purview, that we would be okay. That's all.
Yes, sir.
So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any member comments? Mr. Edwards?
No, I'm good.
Ms. Sigler?
No, great workshop. Well done, Mr. Enos.
Well, thank you. Ms. Marinelli?
Nope. Good job. Thank you, everybody.
Superintendent Connor?
No, thank you for hanging in there and overtime. I appreciate it.
Okay, so everybody in the public, we'll be reconvening at 3 p.m. for the board meeting. And thank you for everybody who watched.